Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Welcome. Glad you're here with us. Be sure to hit the like button, be sure to hit the subscribe button, be sure to hit the notifications bell. Always a pleasure to interact with all of you. It should be a good, fun interaction tonight. So welcome. So glad to be here. Should be fun. So yeah, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Be sure to post this around and invite all your friends. A lot of things we can talk about tonight. So there we go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Alrighty, welcome everybody. So glad to have you all here. The way this works, for those of you who may not be familiar, is I give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are then followed by the roll call, in which I call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. And then after that, after I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. At that point, the next thing that we do is I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if you have a super chat, if there's something you'd like me to talk about, by all means, go ahead and send me a super chat. Go ahead and send me a super chat, and I will be sure to answer that in the second half of our program. That's how it tends to work. So I'll be writing those down. So welcome, everybody. I hope you had a good weekend. I did have a good weekend, accomplished a few things here and there. We had a small demonstration yesterday. Russia is not our enemy, raising awareness about the food crisis, distributing the statement that we wrote about the River of Life from the Center for Political Innovation. I want to shout out to Nick and to Don and to Charlotte who joined us, were with us out there. And some of the other people who came by were supporting us. It was pretty good to be out there. And it's really important that we do it. And it's really important that we be out there. We were there and we're getting done what needs to be done. So I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to wish everyone a happy Victory Day. Today is the day in which the Russians celebrate the victory over fascism in the Second World War. The VE Day, I think we call it in the United States, Victory in Europe Day. There's been big parades in Moscow and in Russia. There's been a big speech by the Russian president about the importance of defending the homeland and defeating fascism and defending the legacy of the role Russia played in defeating the Nazis in World War II. That's been pretty exciting. And actually, there were some people in Chicago, members of the Center for Political Innovation. There were, what is Juche? All right, writing it down. There were some folks in Chicago who actually took to the streets of Chicago for Victory Day, members of the Center for Political Innovation. They sent me a very short video of some of what they did in the streets of Chicago, in the public square, so to speak, for Victory Day. So I guess we'll show that video as we get started here. It was kind of neat. One of the members is playing the Soviet national anthem on her violin. The other is holding the flag of the Donetsk People's Republic. And they just kind of made a point of being out in the streets. So we'll play that.
Yes.
Happy Victory Day!
Yeah, that was great. That was great for them to do that. I'm really glad they were out in the streets, and we were out in the streets. We were out in the streets the day before talking about the global food crisis and the need to take action, the need for our leaders to de-escalate with Russia and focus on that. Diane Sayre, who's running for the U.S. Congress, she stopped by the rally, gave some remarks. Shout out to her. That was pretty awesome. So that was pretty cool. And overall, we just keep doing our thing. We are committed to our values. We are committed to opposing fascism. We are committed to standing up for truth in the world of lies. And we're doing the best we can. And that's all that we can do. We got our national training school coming up. That'll be June 22nd through 26th. The invitations for that are going out shortly. Lily Goldklang is the coordinator of that 4-day national gathering that will take place in the heartland of the United States of America. So if you're interested in that, become a dues-paying member of the Center for Political Innovation, and then you'll be invited to that retreat. It's only for members. It's not a public event. It's a 4-day training school. It's going to be pretty awesome if you're interested in that. That's certainly on my mind as we're on here talking about different things. We can talk about the fact that China was also very key in the defeat of fascism. We can talk about the fact that China and Russia are standing united against Western imperialism. They both raised themselves up. Pro-Palestinian groups, Hamas and Hezbollah. All right. Pro-Palestine groups. Hamas and Hezbollah. All right. And very good. We can talk about the world situation, how we're standing against the global imperialist system that is driving people into poverty all over the planet, that is reaping super profits, exploiting countries all over the world, driving down living standards. We can talk about the living conditions in the heartland of America that are deteriorating. We can talk about the price of food and the price of gas. It's devastating working families right now. We can talk about the generation of Americans that are stuck in short-term service sector jobs and how that is ruining their lives. We can talk about the prison industrial complex and the pending low-wage police state that is taking place and why Americans of all different races and nationalities have a duty to stand against it. Or is taking a toll on Russia's economy, right? All right. We can talk about all of this. We can talk about the situation facing the world as we transition away from the deteriorating Western capitalist economy, and we see the rise of the alternative economies in which production is oriented to serve public good and not the profits of a few. There's a lot of things that we can talk about, a lot of topics we can dig into. This is really important. I mean, look, if you look at what important people around the world are thinking about, this is what they're thinking about. They're thinking about the changing nature of the global economy. They're thinking about the danger of a new world war. They're thinking about the living conditions and their deterioration and the increasing political instability in the West. And they're also thinking about technology, about fusion energy, about the alternative to fossil fuels, about the dangers of climate change, about the pending global food crisis that's not just going to be spawned by Russia's inability to export wheat and fertilizer, Ukraine's inability to produce a lot of its crops because of the war, but also because of the droughts and wildfires that are expected and approaching this summer. We can talk about the fact that Cuba just had a horrendous hotel bombing, or not a bombing, it was an explosion that happened at a Cuban hotel. They're still looking into the details. It looks like it was a gas explosion or something, but we're digging into the details to learn more about it. You can talk about Nicaragua and their socialist revolution and all that they've achieved, and how, if you compare them to the free market countries of Guatemala and Honduras, they're doing quite better. Their socialist revolution has had real victories. You can talk about Venezuela and how they continue to withstand the encirclement of the imperialists, and they've utilized public control of their oil and natural gas resources to build up their economy. You can talk about what's going on right now in many different parts of the world. There are many places in the world that we could be discussing. Sri Lanka has been hit very badly due to the food prices, and there's already unrest happening there, and there's soon going to be unrest in many different parts of the world, probably most especially Africa, where the food insecurity problem is getting very serious. Okay. How to distinguish truth with so much. All right. Okay. Duke running 2024. Very, very good. So those are all things we could talk about. And we could talk about that. One thing we can talk about, which I felt might be worth commenting on, is this talk about protests at the home of Supreme Court justices. Folks, I'm actually not opposed to that. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm obviously opposed to any act of violence or threats or any illegal activity. But protesting at the homes of politicians, I don't have a problem with that. Look, one of the places that I have protested many times is at the White House, and that happens to be the home of the president. If people can't protest at the White House, where can they protest? Right? So if you're going to outlaw protesting at the homes of politicians, you're going to have to outlaw protesting at the White House. And that's one of the main places people protest. So not good. But, they say judges, you shouldn't protest at their homes. Well, look, when I was in Cleveland, we protested at the home of U.S. Senator George Voinovich, who was a big outspoken supporter of the Iraq war and continuing the Iraq war and escalating threats against Iran. And with the, I believe it was called the Northeast Ohio Anti-War Coalition that included Roman Catholic clergymen. It included, the American Friends Service Committee and Quakers. It included socialists and communists. We had a rowdy demonstration out in front of George Voinovich's house in Cleveland. And I think that was a fine thing to do, right? You can protest in public spaces, even if those public spaces are near someone's private space. Why do you think the rich people have gated communities? Well, it's to prevent things like this, they talk about this. If you're a celebrity, for example, right? If you're a celebrity, if you become a famous person, you're going to get all kinds of crazy stalkers who want to come to your house and bother you. So what do? You move into a gated community, you get a lot of security, right? Why should it be any different for politicians? Julius Malema and his party. Why should it be any different for politicians? I don't particularly think there's anything wrong with protesting at the homes of politicians. I really don't, right? I really don't think that. And this idea that there's something inherently wrong with it. Now, right now, it tends to be conservatives who are saying that because there are people protesting at the homes of Supreme Court justices that are opposed to Roe versus Wade, that are involved in the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So there's people protesting at their homes. And so the left are the ones saying, yes, we have to be able to have protests. Now, if it were the other way around, if it were conservatives protesting at the homes of liberal justices, and I had said what I just said, which is that I think people should be able to protest in public spaces that are near the private homes of individuals. If I had said that, the response to me would have been, oh my God, you're a Nazi. You want brown shirts to come and terrorize people. You are traumatizing all kinds of trans people. You're a murderous bigot. No, left or right wing, in terms of law, what protests can you allow? What protests can you not allow? If there's a public street near the home of a political figure and somebody wants to protest at that place, I think they should be allowed to do it. Now, if somebody wants to get a gated community to make sure somebody can't get anywhere near where they live, fine. right? I mean, a lot of celebrities do that. A lot of famous people do that, and members of Congress, members of the U.S. Senate, Supreme Court people, they tend to do that, right? So, if they want to take on that extra expense to make sure no one can get near their private property, they have the right to do that. Can the USA be considered a full-on oligarchy? All right. I really don't. I really don't think that that's the idea that protesting near the homes of politicians should be illegal. Now, you obviously can't enter a private home. That would be home invasion, right? You obviously can't attack anyone at their home. That would be attacking them. But there's a long history of this. Wokeism rationalizes why liberalism can't overcome divisions like racism, leftism among the masses. Right? Okay. Rationalizes why you cannot overcome divisions. Bring it down. And at the end of the day, you should be able to protest. There's a history of that with the labor movement. If someone's a crooked boss who's ripping off his employees, it was not uncommon for the union to protest in his neighborhood. Let his neighbors know that he's a sweatshop owner and such. That was not uncommon. In fact, one thing that we saw is during the 1930s, domestic workers would organize. It would be African-American women often who were working as house cleaners or nannies or domestic workers. And there were cheap bastards out there that would, promise to pay these people and not pay them. And so one thing that used to happen in New York City is that, if they hired somebody and didn't pay them, if they hired someone for one day to clean their home and then said, oh, I'm just not going to pay you, deal with it, then they would call up the other domestic workers and they would protest outside the apartment building and say, she refused to pay, and they would embarrass the person, right? Just embarrass the person until they paid. Right. These things happen. Right. And it's pretty wild. This is the whole thing about people are afraid of being doxxed. Right. I've had, people posting my address around places, and I'm not thrilled about it. And neither is my wife. And it happens, and we've dealt with a little bit of silliness, that I've dealt with. But if this can happen to a private citizen, what's to stop it from happening to a politician? Right. At the end of the day, the idea that protests might happen in public streets or public sidewalks that are near the homes of politicians, that is not inherently wrong. It may not be a nice thing to do, but you can't really outlaw it, right? If somebody wants to stand on a public street in front of your house with a sign that says so-and-so is a doo-doo head, they have the right to do it, right? And I don't think that should be illegal. And I don't think judges deserve a special protection from it. Obviously any form of intimidation, if you make a threat against somebody, that's not okay. If you're, putting, going on to their property, that's not okay. But I just think that these things, Meghan Markle's potential, right? Again. I just think that, again, at the end of the day, it's not illegal to not be nice. It's not illegal to annoy people. That's generally what people do when they protest from both sides. Right? And where does this stop? I'm speaking from a legal perspective. I just don't think that, some of these pro-choice people protested at the homes of some right-wing Supreme Court justices. Well, deal with it. They didn't illegally come into your property. If they did that, that's a crime. They didn't attack you or make threats of violence against you. If they did that, that's a crime. But if they happen to go into the neighborhood where you live and have a protest of some kind, I think that's legal. It's legal at this time. It's part of, freedom to assemble. And that's all there is to it. And again, if this was something being done by the right against Democrats, I would be hung or taken out and shot for saying this. Seriously, they would want me punished. They would want me, how dare you ever say such a thing? But if but now that this is something that liberals are doing to conservatives, I'm on the right side. Okay, that's bullshit. Are you sure that that's why though? I'm not sure that that's why. I think that if you pay attention to what's been going on with infrared, I think, again, these people are harassers, but there's more to it than that. But maybe it is. So, Haas should be back on infrared and on Twitch, right? I mean, this harassment, has got to stop. And actually, that's, we can briefly touch on that. I mean, look, these people. I don't know any other way to say this, right? And I don't know how to say this without sounding, whenever I say stuff like this, people will get annoyed. People, laugh it off. People say I'm being paranoid and all of that. But it's like, you can choose to look the other way if you want. But any tweet anyone makes attacking patriotic socialism now immediately gets boosted by the algorithms. Immediately, right? If you got on the internet right now and said, patriotic socialism is bullshit, they're all a bunch of Nazis, they would immediately, thoughts on the impact of, I can't comment on that, right? Trotsky and Dimitrov on fascism, right? Trotsky and Dimitrov on fascism. This is media. If you get on there, if you make a tweet denouncing patriotic socialism, immediately, people will, it'll show up in people's feeds. And why is that? Well, we do know that Twitch purged infrared and Haas, and it purged Jackson Hinkle on the same day. And while they did that, they ran an article in the Financial Times newspaper about why they did it. And they mentioned infrared, and they said that Twitch had banned what they considered to be Russian propagandists. So two of the major voices in favor of patriotic socialism have been labeled Russian propagandists. They're not. Jackson Hinkle's from California. His dad's from Michigan. He's a nice guy. He takes a position that is anti-imperialist and sympathetic to Russia. But he's not Russian state affiliated media. He's just a guy. He's been on the Jimmy Dore show a number of times. He ran for city council. So there's that. Haas is also from Michigan. He's a nice guy. He's got his own community. He's got his own viewpoints. Not everything he says I agree with, but he knows that. I think he's a good guy. He's on the right side of most things. Sometimes, the way he approaches things is different than my approach, but that's okay. He's a good guy and he's doing a good thing, right? He's getting people to dig into philosophy and ideas. And then there's me, and I've had my Twitter labeled Russian state affiliated media, and I have been banned from PayPal. So the three major voices of patriotic socialism are all people who've been labeled by the deep state as traitors, allies of Russia. And then it just so happens that any tweet that anyone makes accusing us of anything, immediately gets boosted in the algorithms. I'm serious. Like these tweets from accounts that have 500 followers, they'll tweet out, I think these patriotic socialism people are Nazis. And it'll get like 1,000 likes, right? It's very, very clearly being boosted. And, it's pretty wild because, if you watch the video, me and my friends were out in the streets of New York, and this crazy guy was calling us traitors, and being violent with us, right? It was kind of an intense day yesterday. So on the one hand, we're traitors and we're Russian propagandists, but on the other hand, we're promoting, we're promoting, what do you call it? We're promoting, we're promoting chauvinism or something. We've said a million times that we don't support colonialism. We've said a million times we advocate sovereignty and reparations to indigenous people. Yeah. Okay. All right. Is abortion tied? We've said that many times. Many times we've said that. It doesn't matter. People just keep repeating the same thing. That's the one criticism we get, is that if you say that you're patriotic to the United States, which is what communists around the world always say, which is what communists around the world have been urging American communists to do for years, if you say that, you're a Nazi. That means you don't recognize the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. That means you don't recognize the horrors of what was done to indigenous people. If you just say that, socialism is about making a better country, we're socialists and we're anti-imperialists because we want to make a better country, because we love our country, we want life to get better here. If you say that, that means that you are, somehow a neo-Nazi. These are not logical arguments, but they're being promoted all over social media and boosted in the algorithms. I mean, at this point, there is a very clear targeted campaign against my viewpoint and against the viewpoint that is similar and pretty close viewpoint put out by Jackson Hinkle, pretty similar viewpoint put out by Haas. There is clearly an effort on the part of the establishment to silence us and shut us down. Now, if you want to deny that, you're free to deny that. You're free to just say that's crazy, but it's pretty clear. I mean, when I'm banned from PayPal, when I have Russian state affiliated media tagged on my Twitter, when Haas and Jackson Hinkle are banned from Twitch with an article in the Financial Times explaining why it was done. Now we have Haas in his community being banned from Discord. I mean, these are not a joke. There is a campaign to silence us. There are people that think, even though we're pro LGBT rights, even though there are openly trans members of our community, even though we're hailing the history of anti-racism in this country, even though we're standing up for the ideology that was believed by, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Congress and Paul Robeson and the Black Panthers, there is a huge effort to silence us on the one hand, and then there's also a huge effort to smear us, right? And these people, it's so obvious that they're lying. It is so obvious that they're lying. It's so obvious that they are lying. These people, they say things that don't have even a grain of logic to them. They have a quote from me where I say that the people of the world should recognize their common destiny and fight for a fight against the ruling elite for a better life for their children. Pretty basic statement. But because it contains the word children, they claim that somehow this is the same as the 14 words of George Lincoln Rockwell, who said he wanted to fight for the white race and white children. Well, there's a pretty big difference between all the people of the world and all the people of the United States and white people. Right. And there's, I myself am married to someone who is not white. I am not going around promoting the white race or whiteness or white separatism or anything like that. I'm just not doing that. That's very blatantly obvious. But that doesn't stop these people with very big YouTube channels from putting this out there and trying to tell people that it is a fact. They know it to be true. I am going around promoting white nationalism, which I am not. Right? I am not doing, and my record opposing police brutality, as you can look, I've posted a lot of articles on here and just dig a little bit into who I am. My record opposing police brutality, my record standing in solidarity against racism, my record standing in solidarity with people in Yemen, my record supporting the Muslim community in this country is a mile long. And I don't even have to go into detail about that because it's all very blatantly in front of your eyes. But there is a huge effort to pump out there into the minds of people that somehow I am an advocate of white nationalism. You can talk about various things. We did a good refutation video of Sophie from Mars, her video on the conspiracy left, because some of the stuff that she talked about on there was interesting. She denied that the Congress for Cultural Freedom program of the CIA ever existed, and it clearly did. So we talked about that. She claimed that somehow pointing out that the Holocaust and fascism is rooted in the breakdown of capitalism, and not just rooted in ordinary people being inferior barbarians, which is what she claims, that somehow doing that is denying the Holocaust. That was worth talking about. We talked about Hannah Arendt and her anti-populist narrative that equates Nazism. Okay. Equates Nazism with communism. We talked about that. That was interesting, right? We had an interesting stream. We did a stream. It's kind of funny. It was called, Sophie Go Back to Mars. It was pretty funny. There's a new attack on me that's not even worth engaging with because it would be boring to watch me dissect it all because it's just it would just be a 2-hour stream of I clearly didn't say that. 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 It would get boring after a while because it's like it's just quote after quote from me saying completely sensible and logical things like there's a crisis of mass migration, and while right-wing bigotry is not the answer is also not just to ignore it, and the left calls you a Nazi if you acknowledge it, and it's rooted in the breakdown of capitalism. Me saying completely sensible things like, that part of the Protestant work ethic in the United States and the radical individualism in the United States is rooted in some of the Germanic sentiments that you can trace back to Odinism, that Alan Turing, the genius, who invented the computer revolution, or, invented the decoding machine, is an unappreciated genius who was persecuted for being gay. It's like I'm saying completely sensible, completely rational things. And these people take them. And it's like, again, just 2 hours of taking things that I say and doing this psychological magic. Well, that means something completely unrelated, something completely different, that is something that an advocate of white supremacism or neo-Nazism would say. And I mean, these people, and it's like, you look at some of these quotes they found, it's almost like you have to wonder, like, if you're going to do that, you can make your video 5 hours long. I mean, some of these quotes are so obviously not saying what they claim I'm saying. At one point in the video, they claim that I advocated something clearly illegal that I would never advocate, and made a very, very big point of not advocating, and they try to make it sound like I advocated that, when if you watch the clip, which they play in the video, I clearly said very much the opposite of that. These people are vicious, right? And again, this is a campaign against me, right? There is a campaign to try and destroy us. Now, if you want to deny that, that's fine, right? And you can deny that all you want, but there is a vicious campaign to try and destroy my reputation. There's a vicious campaign to try and incite physical violence against me, which is basically what these videos are doing, right? If you put all over the internet that someone's a neo-Nazi, the hope is that there'll be some deranged person that will see that and think that they'll be a hero by murdering you, which is what they're trying to do, right? It's an attempt to incite violence, and some of it is an attempt to incite state repression, claiming I said very clearly things I didn't say. But it's like, again, I actually was kind of amused by the video. I found it entertaining because I'm interested in my own writings and seeing people quoting this, quoting that, it's pretty good. But the level of dishonesty, if you're not morally outraged by it, you're not being intellectually honest with yourself. And one of the things, that I really, most of you here that are watching, you get this, right? You get what's going on here, right? That this is a vicious hate campaign. It's based on ugly lies. It's not got any basis, in fact. And it's not even very creative at this point. They're simply just, again, quote from me where I say there's a crisis of mass migration and it's causing a problem. And, obviously right-wing bigotry isn't the answer, but also, left wing, the left wing just kind of ignoring it is not the answer either. Oh my God. Oh, there's just so many attempts to take me out of context. And it's like, it's obvious in the quotes, it doesn't mean what it means. So when people are doing that, you have to ask, why are people so vicious and so desperate to try and destroy what we're doing here? Right? Why? And why do they discredit themselves so much? There's so many members of this community, I will add. I tweeted that, I know a few members of CPI that joined because they first heard about me in videos like this. Oh my goodness, that was just the tip of the iceberg. That's a lot of people in the group. A lot of people that are promoting us on social media and all this heard about us through these smear videos. They actually looked into what we had to say, and they like us. And my book sales today, I checked, and my book sales were through the roof. More people are getting interested in what I actually have to say, but it's like, why are they doing this, right? Again, if we are not a threat in some way to the status quo, why is there such an effort to shut us down? Right? I mean, we're getting worse treatment than the far right gets at this point. I mean, the far right, they're considered offensive or whatever, but at the end of the day, they believe in free market capitalism. They're promoted, they're, I don't know about that. That's an interesting theory. They're promoting free market capitalism, the right wing. They're promoting ethnic and racial bigotry and reinforcing people's, just kind of reinforcing kind of backward sentiments on the part of people. We're not doing that, right? We're advocating socialism, but we're advocating socialism in a way that people might actually understand it, right? That we're trying to make the country better. We're not trying to destroy it with big civil war. We're socialist because we love America, not because we want to destroy America. That we have actual economic policies that could be implemented to make the country better. I mean, that is a real threat to the status quo. We're not LARPing. We're not fooling around, right? We're being serious. We are advocating what we believe in a very coherent and serious way. And that is why we are met with such heavy repression. And I mean, if you watch this stuff, I mean, there is just a vicious campaign. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that, it's one thing for there to be people who just see this shit and believe it, right? And they see it and they think it's true. Why? It's on the internet. It's got hundreds of thousands of views. Must be true. Don't bother to do any research. That annoys me. It genuinely annoys me. But, I wish you would do more research. I wish you would actually look at my work. And those who do actually tend to end up becoming sympathetic to what we do. And then there's people that are part of our community and they see this stuff and they get really outraged that people would go out of their way to lie. I mean, claiming that a statement calling for the people of the world to unite against imperialism is somehow advocating racial separatism. That's bullshit. That's just ridiculous. Right? I mean, claiming that, I mean, there's just many examples I could go over where they're just so obviously lying, right? Claiming that criticizing the anti-populist narrative that blames ordinary people for the Holocaust, not capitalism and the breakdown of capitalism, that criticizing that somehow means you're denying the Holocaust, which is like completely different, right? I mean, these people are vicious liars. However, there's a third type of person, and that's the person that I think we need to call out more. And that's the type of person that says, okay, I see all the shit that they're saying about Caleb. I see it on the internet, right? I see them claiming that a guy who's married to someone who's not white, who's been, protesting against police brutality for years, who's filmed acts of police brutality and gotten people of color acquitted in court with his video, who risked his life on a ship trying to bring medical aid to Yemen, that this guy is somehow an advocate of white nationalism. I see that. And I know it's not true. I know that Caleb's not that. But I heard this other thing that Caleb said one time where I don't agree with him. So I'm either going to kind of go along with this campaign or I'm going to be silent. Those are the people that need to be called out. I'm serious, right? Because it's like, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example here where what we could compare this to, but it's like, that ain't what it's about. And I'm seeing a lot of that, of people that are like, okay, sure, Caleb's not a white nationalist. Caleb's not preaching hate. Caleb's not, advocating violence. Caleb's, a pretty sensible, rational dude. But there's this little thing that I don't agree with him on. So that gives me an excuse to join the pro-imperialist hate mob against him. And I'm seeing a lot of that. And that needs to be called out immediately. That is completely unacceptable. That again, it's nothing but cowardice, right? They see a brutal crime being committed, right? I mean, I'm sorry, but when there's videos all over the internet claiming that someone who's dedicated their life to anti-racism is an advocate of white supremacism, I mean, when they're shutting down my PayPal, when they're labeling my Twitter Russian state affiliated media, when they're banning Haas and Jackson Hinkle from Twitch, like, this is serious. I mean, you're messing with people's incomes, you're messing with people's reputations. When you see this happening, you can go, this is wrong. And I'm a progressive. And if they can do this to Caleb or Jackson Hinkle or Haas, they could do it to me. So I should be against it. Right? I mean, that's just pretty basic. But then there's a certain type of person that goes, well, I don't want to take a stand, and 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 they might call me that too. And if they call and if I say that what they're doing to Caleb is wrong, then they might say that I'm those things when I'm obviously not that. And well, that there is this thing I disagree with Caleb on, and so I can find a way that maybe I can shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. People like that need to be morally shamed. If you know what's happening to us is wrong, and you either sit on the sidelines and do nothing about it, or you full on go, oh, yeah, well, Caleb's an asshole because I disagree with a thing he wrote one time 10 years ago, or one time, my friend, didn't like the way he looked at them. I mean, that needs to be shamed immediately. That needs to be shamed immediately. I mean, that is completely ridiculous. Julian Assange has said so many things I disagree with. Julian Assange, if you go over his tweets over the years, said so many things I disagree with. And if I sat there and said, well, sure, they're going to try to torture him to death here in the United States, and sure, it's an attack on free speech, but he did say that thing I disagree with him about, that would be completely unacceptable on my part. Julian Assange needs to be freed. The attack on him is wrong, period. I don't care what Julian Assange said about immigration. I don't care what Julian Assange said about the Israel. He needs to be freed, right? Plain and simple. If they can do to Julian Assange what they're doing, they can do it to anybody. They basically can create a situation where people are, journalists can't publish information that's given to them out of fear they might be classified. You have to free Julian Assange. He needs to be freed. And when people go, yeah, but, I'm actually really scared. If I say free Julian Assange, somebody who disagrees with me might be mean to me. And so there's this thing that I disagree with him on. So I can join. No, don't do that. I mean, that's just, you're not a good person if you do that. I don't know how to tell you any other way. Right. Okay. Economic history of Vietnamese socialism. I mean, I don't know how to say it. I really don't know how to say it in any other way. And I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, I don't really know. There's no other way to say it. That's it. That's it. I mean, period. I mean, and it's just like, we need to call out the people who do that. The people who play this game where, these people are obviously telling obvious lies about somebody. They're obviously trying to intimidate this person. They're obviously trying to shut down a dissident. They're trying to ban free speech. They're trying to shut them down. But I found an excuse to be okay with that. I mean, this is how McCarthyism thrived. This is how they got away with McCarthyism, was that, that there were all kinds of people who weren't in the Communist Party, but saw what was happening to the Communist Party and saw that it was wrong. But they found a way to go, yeah, but Stalin's really bad, and the Communist Party defends Stalin too much, and blah, 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 blah. And this is how the ACLU didn't stand up for the Communist Party, right? The ACLU ended up kicking Elizabeth Gurley Flynn out of their group, and this is how they went around with it. They went along with these things because they basically made excuses to go along with the mob. And we have to call that kind of behavior out. And I don't really care about the people who don't know the truth. I don't care. People who don't know the truth, I don't care about. People who do know the truth, but really are just fucking cowards, they need to be called out. We need to call them out and not let them get away with this. We really, really have to. We really have to call them out, because if we don't, then pretty soon they're going to come for you, and no one's going to do anything about it. And this is kind of a serious situation. And and if we just kind of ignore it, this is feeding the monster, right? It's feeding the monster, and we need to stand up against it. I mean, I don't know any other way of putting it. I don't know any other way of putting it. Look at what they're doing to Haas. Look what they're doing to Jackson Hinkle. Look what they did to Mint Press News when they banned them from social media, right? I mean, are they going to say that Manar Adeli, the editor of Mint Press News, is she a white nationalist even though she's an Arab? Is she an incel even though she's a woman? Like, give me a break. I mean, it's just, Doesn't matter. They go after people who tell the truth. The reason they're going after me is because I'm telling you the truth, because I'm standing up against the lies. And in a situation, a very tense international situation like Russia, I'm standing up and telling the truth. That's why they're going after me. And if you don't take a stand against it, if you somehow find an excuse to go along with it, what you're saying is that imperialism is good. That's all you're saying. So there you go. Okay. Automatic. Okay. Right. All right. All right. Very good. Great work, Robert. That's great. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Another thing that would be great if people could do is, post clips from these streams on your channel. Dylan today, someone who's in the chat, he made a YouTube channel and he posted a number of clips from an interview I just did. In fact, I'll post one of them here in the chat. You should all go immediately subscribe to his channel. And he did that, right? We got Historical Progress out of Chicago. They're doing that. This is how we are getting out there. People are hungry for the message that we have to offer. And we're getting the message out there and people are ready for it. So, that's what we're doing. And we just have to keep going and we're going to keep going. We're not going to stop, right? I mean, and that's what I think these people really are convinced, that if they're just mean enough to us, we're going to stop. And it's like, no, doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. I'm 34 years old, folks. If I was going to stop, I would have stopped years ago. So there you go. This is Dylan, Dylan's latest, channel. Go and subscribe to it. He's posting some of our content. That's pretty awesome. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going. And they're going to make it harder for me to do what I did. Do you think your Discord is going to be banned? I don't have a Discord. There are people associated with these lives in this community who go on Discord. I do not endorse any of those Discords. At one point, they were fighting with each other. There were 2 Discords, and they were fighting over the rules. And I do not, if people are on Discord talking about this stuff, awesome. But I do not endorse. There's no Discord that is an official Discord of this channel or official Discord of CPI. There are people on Discord who talk about these things, but actual CPI communications don't happen on Discord. We have other apps through which we communicate. And if you become a dues-paying member, why, you can do that. Oh, and Chaya is saying that she wants to send clips to people. So if they want to do that, that's great. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of really, I just wanted to do kind of a news roundup for tonight's opening remarks. So why don't we do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. I haven't seen his work. I haven't seen Dave's works, Magnar. I haven't seen his works. I just don't know enough about it. I'll have to look into Mr. Emery, Dave Emery's work. But why don't we do the roll call, names and locations. And then from there, we can, at that point, I can start answering your super chat questions. There we go. So names and locations. We got Elias from Finland is with us. Chris Morlock in San Francisco. Christian Bergen in County. Montreal. Chaya. Jason Hunt in Chicago. Don D in NYC. Good workout in the streets of NYC. Tristan in Maryland. Go subscribe to Parasocialite. Great YouTube channel. David from Atlanta. Phil from Miami. Dario from Brooklyn. Clydebank, New Jersey. St. David's, Bermuda. New York. Adrian from New York. Brock, LaSalle. Pueblo. Marissa from Washington State. Kieran from San Diego. Welcome. Aiden Stone, Brooklyn, New York. Rodrigo from Brazil. Fox Lake, Illinois. Hamilton, Ohio. Jonathan from Arkansas. Bob Troy, New York. Yorba from Linda, California. Adrian from Brazil. Upper West Side, New York City. Chuck Zlatkin. Scott from Miami. Yada Yisroel, California. Dylan Small. Great work on YouTube, by the way, Dylan. Vancouver. Isaac. San Antonio. Balthazar from Oakland. Stephen in Southern Oregon. Mike in North Carolina. Union County, New Jersey. We got Naples, Florida. Harold Sullivan. Lockport, New York. El Dorado, California. Very, very good. Stephen and Ann Ringgold in Georgia. Very, very, very good. I got John Celeste in Lockport. Very, very good. Marikina in the Philippines, Micah in Las Vegas, Amber from Evergreen State, Washington, Proletarian Clips is in Texas, Charles is in Sacramento, Caracas, Venezuela, Ireland, Ragin' Cajun, Woodlands, Texas, right? Didn't the Three Stooges, I think they had a thing where they would go Texas as homage to the, the old deep in the heart of Texas. Caracas, Venezuela, Jose Gonzalez, Ireland, Jake, UWS, Richard from Woodland, Lost City of Atlantis, Bromley, United Kingdom. Very, very good. Northern California, we need critical thinking. Very, very good. Gabby Hernandez is in Chicago. Shout out to you. Robert in Hawaii. Shout out to you. Richwood, Nathaniel from Washington State. Oh, so good to have all of you here. Welcome, everybody. Sean V in Oregon, right? Nathaniel from Washington State. Very, very good. Zachariah in Seattle. Io Hillary in New York City. Shout out to you, Io. Good to have you with us. Great friend of the program. Zach in Seattle. Privet from Mars. Privet? What is a privet? All right. Sam in Chicago. Martin from Singapore. What about Sing-a-Rich? Do they have Sing-a-Rich? Just kidding. I shouldn't do that, right? You're not supposed to do that. Make jokes about places. That's like, I just offended the whole island of Singapore. The whole country of Singapore I just offended. I am sorry. I apologize, Martin. I apologize. I should not have made a pun at the expense of your country. Please forgive me. There we go. If I ever go to Singapore, I will be publicly caned like Michael Fay for making that joke. Just kidding. Anyway, Bill from Hamtramck, Michigan. I have lived in Hamtramck, Michigan. For a couple months, I actually stayed in an apartment out in Hamtramck back when I was doing an internship in Detroit. No worries. We are rich, but there you go. All right. All right. Alexander from Ukraine. Welcome, Alexander. But anyway. All right, everybody. We're going to start answering super chats. If you have something you want me to talk about, I will answer your super chat questions. What is Juche? Juche means self-reliance in Korean, and it is the application of Marxism-Leninism that is applied on the Korean Peninsula. It is the ideological developments of Kim Il-sung. One of the main reasons they emphasized Juche so much in North Korea during the 1970s and 80s was because of the Sino-Soviet split. North Korea was neutral. They were neutral in the Sino-Soviet split. They did not immediately align with the Soviet Union. They did not immediately align with China. There were times when China was attacking, criticizing North Korea. There were times when North Korea was aligning with China against the Soviet Union. At one point, Jiang Qing, Mao's wife, launched a campaign against Kim Il-sung. She called Kim Il-sung a fat revisionist pig, and they had protests against North Korea at the Chinese-Korean border. But then there were other times that Kim Il-sung was meeting Mao and shaking hands with Mao and was loving Mao. And after Mao's death, when things got even more confusing, throughout the 1980s, North Korea went back and forth. Sometimes they seemed to be in the Chinese camp. Sometimes they seemed to be in the Soviet camp. And so it became very important for North Korea to keep unity within their party. And in order to keep unity within their party, they had to say, well, we have our own ideology. We are not Maoists. We are not Soviet communists. We are Jucheists. We have self-reliance. And so that was a big emphasis. And they, in the 1980s, they had a really big campaign to emphasize their unique ideology. Now, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Kim Il-sung, and he died shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, but Kim Il-sung and then his son, Kim Jong-il, they published a number of very important pamphlets. All right. I don't know enough about Finnish history. I apologize. They published very, very important pamphlets, that were about, there's one called Abuses of Socialism Will Not Be Tolerated. Why did the Soviet Union fall, etc. And in that, they emphasized some of the problems in the Soviet system. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the North Korean government at this point says that they uphold Juche ideology above Marxism-Leninism. They argue that the Juche ideology it's rooted in Marxism-Leninism, but it's a higher stage. If you ask them what they believe in, they say, well, Marxism-Leninism is the basis of it. They have monuments to Marx and Lenin and stuff there, but they believe they have a higher ideological formation called Juche. That's fine. I mean, Juche is it's fine. Just like, you have Ba'athist Arab socialism in the Arab world, just like you have you have in the Latin American countries, you have Bolivarianism. I mean, you've got the Juche ideology in North Korea. The Juche ideology is based on Marxism-Leninism. After the fall of the Soviet Union, they decided to develop it even more and drop Marxism-Leninism from their official documents, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. It's pretty wild. But there's a lot of bullshit about North Korea. I've told this story a few times recently. I guess it bears repeating. Is that Bruce Cummings is the most well-respected scholar of Korean history in the United States. Dr. Bruce Cummings, he's based in Chicago. He's a brilliant scholar. It'd be great if the folks out in Chicago could track him down and interview him. He wrote a really great book, Korea's Place in the Sun. He wrote another book called North Korea, Another Country. He made a documentary called The Unknown War about U.S. war crimes during the Korean War, and it was shown on BBC, and they refused to show it on American television. Bruce Cummings is a brilliant intellectual. And Dr. Bruce Cummings, when he spoke at my university, I asked him, what about all these claims that, Kim Il-sung lives in a palace and they teach everyone he invented the hamburger and all this. He said none of that's true. He said he's frequently asked by ABC, NBC, major news outlets to confirm these rumors. And he says he can't. And he always asks them what their source is. And they will say the South Korean military, which means not credible, right? But these lies are routinely spread in American media. They're just routinely spread as if they are just, oh no, it's a fact. They claim women in North Korea can't ride bicycles. That's bullshit. Women in North Korea ride bicycles all the time. Women from North Korea have won gold medals in women's boxing and sharpshooting, and it's bullshit. All right, it's just bullshit. And they say bullshit about North Korea all the time. All the time. They say bullshit. Just straight up bullshit about North Korea. And if you get up and say, hey, how do you know that's true? They immediately just go, what? Are you defending North Korea? And I mean, one of these North Korean survivors, she claims that the trains in North Korea have no electricity. The trains in North Korea, you can see them on satellite running without a bunch of people pushing them. I mean, that's such ridiculous bullshit. But and if they can lie so viciously about North Korea, why should you believe anything else that these people say? Right. And again, people that are anti-tanky, that are taking this position, they're okay with these kind of lies. Right. And that's why you have to be a tanky. Right. I mean, it's like, all these people that are anti-tanky bread tubers are basically saying that all of that's okay. Sure, they're clearly lying about North Korea. Sure, they're making up a bunch of stupid bullshit about North Korea. Sure, the media is saying all kinds of things that have no factual accuracy about North Korea, but that's okay because we believe in a more quote-unquote democratic form of socialism. We don't want people to associate us with those bad North Koreans, so we're going to be okay with them smearing a country in order to wage economic warfare against them and maybe have a real war at some point. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. If you think about everything that North Korea has been up against, right? I mean, this is a country that the USA killed about 4 million of their people during the Korean War. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, they were subjected to a food blockade where millions of people starved to death because the USA wouldn't allow them to import oil. It's pretty awful what they've been through. But yet, despite being up against that, economically, they've carried out real miracles. They've created universal housing, universal employment. Their population is very well educated. Most North Koreans can speak more than one language. That's pretty big, and it's not true in the United States. Most Americans speak more than one language. they've developed, because of the sanctions, they've had to develop their own technology. They have their own cell phones. They have their own computer technology because they've had to develop it on their own because of the sanctions. And that's kind of amazing. So despite everything they've been up against, despite the fact they are a very authoritarian country, no doubt about it, the human rights level in North Korea is not what it is in the West. Again, they're fighting for their lives under threat from the United States, trying to survive. So, they're fighting for their lives. When you're fighting for your life, you don't have a human rights paradise. But regardless, they've carried out some real achievements, and they stood in solidarity with the Black Panthers. No country was as loved, in terms of its solidarity with the Black Panthers as North Korea. There was a special admiration for the Juche ideology among the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers received money from North Korea. They received, training. They went to North Korea and were welcomed as heroes. Eldridge Cleaver actually lived in North Korea at one point. The North Koreans have stood in solidarity. And furthermore, the North Koreans have made it very, very clear that they are not against the American people. They're not against the American people. They admire John Brown. They admire Harriet Tubman. They admire Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They admire many progressive people. They're against the fascist American government. I've actually met North Koreans before, and I've talked with them about this topic, right? At the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2013, and again in the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2017, I met North Koreans, and I engaged with them. And they don't hate me because I'm an American. They hate imperialism and what it's done, and they want their relationship with the United States to get better. I'm not trying to say everything's perfect in North Korea, and I'm not trying to say every decision they've ever made is good, but they're up against the US imperialists. They're under attack. They're fighting for their lives, and in such circumstances, despite everything that they're up against, they've done a lot of good. So, there's plenty that you can applaud North Korea for a country like that too. I mean, the fact they launched their own spacecraft. I mean, can you imagine any other country surrounded and blockaded the way they are? They've launched their own spacecraft. I mean, North Korea is a country that deserves the support of anti-imperialists. And yes, they have their own interpretation. Self-reliance, right, is the Juche ideology. And there's a lot of self-help kind of stuff in Kim Il-sung's writing. Kim Il-sung is advising you about how to stay physically fit, how to be a good Korean citizen. One funny story I heard was that there was an American communist who went to North Korea, and he had long hair, really long hair, and a beard. And the North Koreans said to him, they said, "Don't you know short hair will defeat U.S. imperialism?" And he said, "What?" And that's actually a slogan in North Korea. Short hair will defeat U.S. imperialism. I think that's pretty badass. So there you go. Short hair will defeat U.S. imperialism. But there you go. All righty. Next question. Pro-Palestine groups I was asking about, specifically Hamas and Hezbollah. Well, where do I begin? I mean, there's the Palestinian Authority, the PA, also known as the Palestine Liberation Organization. And that is the government of Palestine, right? It's the government of occupied Palestine, basically. The people living under Israeli occupation, that is their recognized government. And the PA has many different factions within it. There are many different political parties. At one point, you had I guess there was what they called the main Marxist-Leninist Palestinian resistance group was called the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, and that was led by Layla Khalid, who engaged in some very militant acts against Israel, was in prison and then was released, and she's kind of considered a legendary hero of the Palestinian resistance, Layla Khalid. You can read about her, a heroic fighter for the Palestinian people. There's also the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the DFLP. And that was, in the 70s and 80s, the Palestinian resistance was dominated by Marxist-Leninist groups. Now, after the Islamic Revolution of 1979, I believe in Palestine, there emerged something called the Islamic Jihad in Palestine. And the Islamic Jihad in Palestine are Shia Muslims, and they are pro-Iranian. They're Shia Muslims. And they are, they're a Palestine resistance group, Islamic Jihad in Palestine. Now, the group known as Hamas. Hamas was the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood started in Egypt. It was a conservative group that believed in free market capitalism, that believed that capitalism was fine as long as you have programs for poor people, right? As people pay what they call a zakat, like an Islamic tax, then capitalism's fine. They believed in the free market. They believed in technology. They believed in democracy and elected governments. It's what people refer to it as Westernized Islam. The Muslim Brotherhood, which nowadays it's like the ruling ideology in Tunisia and in Turkey and in Qatar, it's a big current. Hamas was the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it's now a matter of public record. I mean, it is widely acknowledged now that Israel funded Hamas, that Israel in the 80s was mainly threatened by the Marxist-Leninist groups in Palestine. They didn't like the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They didn't like the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So they covertly began giving money and resources to Hamas because they were against communism. And then eventually Hamas cut ties with the Muslim Brotherhood. Now they're a separate organization, but that's what they are. Hamas is the legacy of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine that, yes, originally was supported by Israel. Now obviously it's not, but that's Hamas. Hamas is in Palestine. Now, Hezbollah is something completely different. Hezbollah is in Lebanon. It's not in Palestine. There's a lot of Palestinians in it. There's a lot of Palestinians who were evicted and driven out of Palestine and went to Lebanon. But Hezbollah is in Lebanon, and Hezbollah are Shia Muslims. They're Shia Muslims, and they started out basically during the Israeli war in the 80s when Israel invaded Lebanon in the 1980s. There were many militias that were formed to fight Israel. Local communities formed their own kind of armed groups to protect their neighborhoods. I believe one of them was called the Organization of the Oppressed on Earth. One of them was called God's Soldiers. They had many different names, right? And so after, throughout the 80s, eventually they all merged into one, and it's called Hezbollah. The leader of Hezbollah is Nasrallah. And they are Shia Muslims, and they look up to the Islamic Revolution of Iran for inspiration. They're Shia Muslims, and they're based in Lebanon, and they're a major political party in Lebanon. They're not just, they're not just an armed group. They do have militias, they do have their own armed forces, etc. But at this point, they are part of the government. They are the government of Lebanon. They're not all the government of Lebanon. They're a big chunk of the government of Lebanon, a big chunk of the territory of Lebanon is under the control of Hezbollah, and they're Muslims, but they do have openly Christian members. They do have, I think, in the Communist Party of Lebanon, it goes back and forth, but sometimes the Communist Party is aligned with George Lukacs and his contribution to Marxism. All right. So, yeah, I mean, that's what Hezbollah is. So, yeah, I mean, that's the Palestinian resistance. It's kind of interesting that there is a something called the Israeli Communist Party, and they have like one seat, and it's Arab Israelis mainly. There's a woman who's been elected to the Israeli Knesset, who's from the Israeli Communist Party. And I actually got to meet her once. She came to New York and gave a presentation. It was very interesting to the U.S. Peace Council. So there you go. All righty. I think that breaks that down. The war taking a toll on Russia's economy. Hope that was helpful, Io. I hope that helped break things down. The war taking a toll on Russia's economy. Well, I mean, there's economic warfare being waged against Russia right now, but actually Russia's economy is not suffering as much as our economy is. I mean, it's suffering. I mean, the sanctions are pretty awful, and, but Russia, they have their own farming stuff. So they're not going to be affected by the inability, they're not going to be hugely affected by the agricultural sanctions. It's going to be the countries that depend on them for fertilizer and wheat that are going to be affected. Russia has lots of oil and gas, so they're not going to be affected by oil and gas kind of sanctions. They got it, but it's our economy where the price of fuel is going up, the price of food is going up, and the price of food is really going to go up this summer, and there's going to be food shortages all over the world. And on top of that, I just did a story you can see on this channel about uranium, the nuclear power stuff. I mean, the nuclear power industry. I mean, we're not going to get uranium from them. 20% of the power in the United States comes from nuclear energy. So, We're wrecking our own economy. We're wrecking the economies of the United States and the West, in the name of fighting Russia. I mean, they are fighting a war, and it is having a cost in Russia for sure. But at this point, we're facing the cost here. So there you go. But I don't think the Russia's economy is like on the brink of collapse or anything like that. So there you go. How do you distinguish truth with so much lies out there? Well, it's important to fact check things. I mean, one thing that I've noticed, I've said this before, is that there are two types of media in the United States. There is media that's meant for the masses, that is intended to persuade you of what they want you to hear. And then there's media that is more factual and utilized for the leaders to make decisions, right? The CIA World Fact Book, for example, it's on the internet. There's apparently a classified version of it, which I've never seen because I'm not CIA. But the public version of the CIA World Fact Book is out there. I cite it all the time, and it has all kinds of statistics about life expectancy that shows Cuba in a very good light, I mean, it's got like numbers that you can base things on about hospitals, etc. The reason that the CIA World Fact Book is so useful is because it's not intended to convince you of anything. It's intended for CIA people so that they can make decisions about what they're going to do and make tactical decisions. It's information they've gathered from all over the world. Now, it is edited. It is, there is information. From what I understand, when I was in college, the librarian, I guess, was a former U.S. Air Force guy. And I mentioned the CIA World Fact Book. And he said, there's a classified version of it also. I didn't know there was a public version, but there is. So he told me that. I remember the librarian said. And so that's how I know apparently there's a classified version of it as well. But the public version of the CIA World Fact Book is on the internet. And for whatever reason, it's a great resource if you want to find out statistics about life expectancy, about literacy rates in countries, about, electrification, about malnutrition, about infant mortality. It's full of great information. Now some of the commentary, if you read like the whole entry of a country, some of the commentary is a bit biased. That's true. But the numbers speak for themselves and are pretty useful. And if you compare them to other numbers, it's pretty useful. The United Nations has a lot of very good data that they gather. The World Food Program, for example, they put out a lot of very good data. There's a lot of places you can get data that is useful, that is not emphasized. You can't rely on the New York Times. You can't rely on the Wall Street Journal to just tell you the truth about what's happening in the world, right? The main way the media lies is through emphasis. That's the primary way that they lie, right? Great example, Ukraine war. Let's say Russia is accused of committing some horrible crime. Well, they're not lying when they say Russia is accused of committing that crime. However, they're not questioning the report about it. They're giving a huge amount of space to the allegations against Russia. They're not interviewing Russians to give their other side of the story. So are they lying when they say Russia is accused of this? Well, they are. But are they investigating whether that's true or not? No. Are they questioning the credibility of the people who said it? No. Are they asking Russia for their side of the story? No. So it's biased reporting, right? And this is, it's the same with history, right? When they teach you about the Soviet Union, right? And, before the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union was one of the poorest countries in the world. But because of socialism, they became a superpower, electrified the whole country, wiped out illiteracy, invented space travel and defeated the Nazis. They did amazing stuff. However, when I was in college, all we learned about the Soviet Union, click, slide, Holodomor, starving people. See, they had socialism and everyone starved. Next question. Was there a famine in Ukraine in 1933? Yes. So they weren't lying, but they were lying through emphasis. They took a whole country rising up from poverty and having amazing achievements, and they ignored that, but there was a famine. And this is how mainstream media tends to lie. Now, one thing I've also noticed is the New York Times. I really hate the New York Times because it is written for dissidents. The New York Times is like a deprogramming publication. It's written for academics and people that might disagree. And it's basically the tone of the New York Times is, wow, you might actually kind of have a point here, except maybe you don't. And yeah, everything's kind of ambiguous, so don't get excited about it. That's the New York Times. Right? They take things that might be wrong with the American system and they muddy the waters and they try to confuse you a little bit, and then they end in this ambiguity. That's how they like to do things. And I think that's smart, right? That's how these intellectuals like to be. It's like, oh, look, there's truth on both sides. Everything's a matter of opinion. That's what the New York Times is. It's like damage control. And it's not helpful. And plus, the writers all have these huge egos. None of them are like, I'm writing a fucking news article, right? They all think they're writing, they're writing manifestos or they're writing epic novels or something. They're all trying to like wank. So the writers all have this huge ego in the New York Times, and it's like unreadable because they're just showing off. They're like waving their it's a fucking news article. Get to the point, right? So that's a little bit annoying. I hate reading the New York Times, but it's in the New York Times that you will often find admissions, right? The New York Times, if you really want to dig into a topic, right, you will find admissions in the New York Times you won't find elsewhere, right? So if you're, I don't recommend reading the New York Times as a news source because it's like, it's a deprogrammer. Basically, it's designed to take your passion away and lead you to this place of confusion, right? If you just want straight up the approved state party line, read the Wall Street Journal. That's what I read, right? Because the Wall Street Journal, I don't agree with it, and I know it's completely biased, but that is the American party line. If you want to know what you're supposed to believe, open the Wall Street Journal, and it's there. In the first paragraph, they are telling you exactly what they want you to believe. Boom. Period. Very clearly. New York Times, they're telling you kind of what you're supposed to believe, but maybe not. And they think they're so smart, and it's awful to read. But if you're looking up a topic, is it bad that I like it when you swear? Ha ha. Wah, wah, wah. But, when you're looking up a topic, right? Like I used the New York Times excessively in my debate with Destiny because in the article that's kind of ambiguous, you will have a lot of admissions that you won't find elsewhere. And that's what the New York Times is good for. They will, because they're trying to lead you to this place of ambiguity, they will admit things the Wall Street Journal will never admit, which is interesting, right? So there you go. That's what I would recommend. The New York Times, for example, they'll have articles about NAFTA that have real statistics about how NAFTA has damaged the economy of developing countries. So, if you're looking for, admissions from the mainstream media, I recommend the New York Times, right? Just as a source, right? Dig into their archives, read the articles, where they, again, will lie through emphasis, but they'll give you a little bit here. And, that's the New York Times. That's the New York Times. All right. Next question. All right. David Duke, the white supremacist, is running in 2024. That's interesting. Now, it was rumored that when David Duke went to prison, so right after 9/11, this is very interesting. Now, so David Duke, right? Who is David Duke, right? Let's just talk about David Duke for a while, right? I mean, let's just talk about him because, I've actually done quite a bit of research into who David Duke was. So David Duke is from kind of a middle-class family in the South. And his father was a U.S. Air Force intelligence officer, which is very interesting. His father was part of what they called Air America, which was a CIA company that would drop anti-communist propaganda leaflets over Vietnam and over Cambodia. And David Duke grew up in the household of his father, who was a fanatical anti-communist and lived in the South. He grew up in that household, and that's where he grew up. And the story is that I guess when David Duke was a child, he's a little bit younger, right? But I guess when he was a child in like the mid 60s, when they were desegregating the South, for whatever reason, he got into pro-segregationist literature. He got into pro-segregationist writing. And he started really digging into the pro-segregationist arguments, and he became, that became his obsession. He was obsessed with being in favor of segregation, right? And he's living in the South, in Louisiana, at a time when that was, segregation was gotten rid of, right? I mean, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, he really believed in segregation, even though his family, he's not from a whole line of Southern people. That's not him at all, right? I believe his father is like from, Finland or North. Anyway, he's not from an old Southern family, right? But he was a child in the South. His father was an Air Force intelligence officer, and he was growing up at a time, when, segregation was being gotten rid of, when that was the big issue in the South. And he somehow attached himself to being pro-segregation. So he went to Louisiana State University, LSU, in the 70s. In the mid 70s, he was a student at LSU. And he became infamous. He kind of got attention for himself in the media by being a racist. What's his name? William Kunstler, who was a kind of a communist, radical attorney, spoke at his college. He dressed up in a Hitler uniform and carried a poster that said "Kunstler to the gas chamber." That's pretty offensive, isn't it? I'd say that's about as offensive as you can get. And he was a college student, and he got a lot of attention for himself by being an offensive racist, right? And that's what he did. After college, he joined the Ku Klux Klan, and this was the late 70s. It was like 78, 79, right? It's the late 70s. And so I've talked a lot about this, right? I've talked a lot about that period, right? The period, like the Carter years. It's really weird. We think of the 60s, 1968 to like 1972 as being these years of turmoil, and they were. But it's very clear that like the Carter years were like the culmination. Like that was when, the transition from Carter to Reagan. You look at those years, and there's so many big things that happened. The Greensboro massacre, the Iran hostage crisis, boom, 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 right? I mean, it's, and all right, Peace Corps. All right. Serves U.S. imperialism. And, I guess in the Carter years, right, as Jimmy Carter was president, and, the Jimmy Carter presidency was this weird kind of attempt to be truth and reconciliation for the 1960s. They did have the Church Committee where they revealed Project MKUltra, they revealed Project Mockingbird, they revealed COINTELPRO. They were admitting all the bad things the U.S. government did to stop the political upsurge of the 1960s. And, Jimmy Carter pardoned people who went to Canada. If you went to Canada to get out of the draft, he pardoned you, and they all came back. And Jimmy Carter was trying to make peace with the radicals, but then he started the war in Afghanistan with the Afghan trap. He started the war in Nicaragua against the Sandinistas. And Jimmy Carter, it was very much that kind of, Eastern establishment strategy. He was really pushing degrowth. Jimmy Carter, it was that more effective evil. And he then crashed the U.S. economy because they don't believe in industrialization. They want to deindustrialize the United States, and the Iran-Contra, and all of that led to the rise of Reagan. So it was during the Carter years. It's pretty clear that some element in the deep state, we don't know who, was thinking that the Ku Klux Klan might be a useful counter gang, right? And that's pretty well documented. There were members of the Ku Klux Klan with David Duke that were Air Force intelligence officers, that and it's funny, if you watch that movie that what's his name made, that Spike Lee made, Black Klansman, they get it wrong, right? They make it sound like the Klan is infiltrating the government. It was the other way around. There was a section of the U.S. intelligence apparatus that was trying to experiment with using the Ku Klux Klan as a counter gang. One thing, for example, that the Ku Klux Klan did when David Duke was Grand Wizard of it, is the Ku Klux Klan, they went around, they had a comic book about killing white people that was supposed to be a black radical comic book about killing white people. And in the end of the comic book, they had a phone number that you could call if you wanted to get more copies of the comic book. And the Ku Klux Klan went around distributing this in black neighborhoods, hoping that black people would call this number and they would get their information and then give it to the FBI. And they admit they were doing this. Like, they were in direct contact with the FBI. They had this program, basically, where the members of the Klan were going around distributing what looked like revolutionary black literature with phone numbers in it to try and get the information of black people who they would think would be revolutionary so they could hand it over to the FBI, right? That's pretty nasty shit. And, David Duke was very much a government collaborator. I mean, it wasn't like some, and that's one thing that a lot of people that are on the right don't quite understand, is that like David Duke was, his father was an Air Force intelligence officer. right? That's what he was. His father was an Air Force intelligence officer. And when he was running the Ku Klux Klan was walking hand in hand with the FBI. So that Spike Lee movie makes it sound like, oh, the government was being infiltrated by these bad people. No, the government was using these bad people. I mean, it's like chicken or, what is it, chicken or the egg, or the dog, tail wagging the dog. I mean, the message of that Spike Lee movie is like, oh, inside the government there are Klansmen, but we got to get more progressive people. We got to get more black police officers. We got to get progressive people into the government. You're missing the point. Is that David Duke's Ku Klux Klan was very much a tool of the government. And in Greensboro, North Carolina, they murdered 5 communists. Now, David Duke himself was not involved, but the Ku Klux Klan that was led by David Duke shot and murdered 5 communists. It's called the Greensboro Massacre of 1979. And it's a horrendous event where, there were communists who were having a rally, and, the Ku Klux Klan showed up and shot 5 of them. And it was all filmed, and the Klansmen got acquitted. That was in 1979. And Jimmy Carter, the liberal president, refused to bring federal charges against the Klansmen for committing a hate crime. So, yeah, I mean, that was David Duke. And he did that for a while, and he kind of became Mr. White Supremacism. I mean, and he did the tour. He was on the Phil Donahue show, and he was Mr. White Supremacism. And he was young. He was a younger guy, and he was in shape. And, when you think of a Ku Klux Klan guy, you think of some guy with a pot belly who's like, I don't like black people, I'm in the Ku Klux Klan. Well, he wasn't that. He was, slender, and he had a 1970s shag haircut, and, he was, whatever. That's David Duke, right? Anti-Semitism is a big part of his belief, obviously. He thinks there's some kind of secret Jewish conspiracy that controls the government and is using the black people against the white people. That's David Duke. Awful person. So in about 1982, David Duke announced that he was no longer a white supremacist, he said. And he said that he was going to run for Congress in Louisiana, where he's from, and that he no longer was a white supremacist. And he was a Republican. It's bullshit, right? I mean, David Duke, he says, yeah, he apologizes for being in the Klan, but, he still insists he's a white nationalist. So he's still basically a white supremacist. And he still pushes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and whatever. So, but the interesting thing about David Duke, so he got elected in Louisiana to the U.S. Congress. He was a U.S. representative. And if you listen to David Duke in the late 80s and early 90s, he sounded like a Republican. I mean, it was just, he didn't like welfare. He's using the racist tropes about welfare that were common in the Reagan administration. Never talked about Israel. Never talked about some of the stuff that the far right believe that is a little more offensive to the establishment. Never talked about that. It was just kind of your general, black people are all on welfare, and, they're getting welfare from the government, and that's, and that's all bullshit. He was against affirmative action, it sounds like stuff that Republicans used to routinely say, right? I mean, some still do, right? This standard kind of race baiting that Republicans do, where, they use welfare as a code word, they what else do they do? They oppose affirmative action. They say it's offensive to white people, that kind of thing. And that was David Duke. He ran for president a couple times, but the Republican Party was very embarrassed to have him there. So they would block him from the debates. And they would prevent him from debating because he was an embarrassment. He was in Congress. He ran for governor of Louisiana and lost, but he was very close. The majority of white people in Louisiana voted for him, but he lost. And that was the early 90s. And there was kind of an upsurge of racism in the United States. The Clinton administration was in, and there was, the militia movement was big in the 90s. You had the Waco incident, and right-wing opposition to the status quo in the 90s kind of flourished, right? It was kind of like now, but a little bit different, right? You had the rancher kind of people that were fighting the government. You had, the Waco incident in Waco, Texas, where there was like a government standoff. And that was, criticize David Koresh and all you want. That was clearly a brutal murder by the U.S. government. Those people didn't deserve to die. And so the right wing saw those folks as like martyrs for gun rights, etc., Christian martyrs. The federal government went after them. And so you had kind of an upsurge of sympathy, anti-government sentiments, pro-gun sentiments that kind of David Duke was able to kind of attach himself to. So he almost won for governor of Louisiana. Dominic Lusardo, Liberalism and Counter History. And he was out of Congress at that point. And he was just kind of he was out of Congress. And then after 9/11, he went to federal prison. And they got him on, it looks like they got him on some weird technicality. I think it was mail fraud. They claimed that when he was mailing letters to his supporters asking them for money, he didn't dot the I's across the T's. It's not clear what they got him for. I mean, it was, and he ended up pleading guilty. And his version of events, he says that he's, that he was framed up. He says that he's David Duke. I mean, he's the face of white supremacism. So any jury is going to convict him. I mean, do you want to be on the jury that didn't convict David Duke? I mean, would anyone want to be on the jury that didn't convict David Duke? He's the face of white supremacism. He's like public enemy number one. So he claims he was unfairly tried up. And that, as disgusting as an individual as he is, and as much as he very much does deserve to go to jail, it may be that the charges they eventually put him in jail for were bullshit. That's very possible, right? That doesn't mean he's a good guy. He's a very bad guy, but it's possible. I don't know. I haven't looked into the details of the case. Regardless, David Duke went to federal prison, and when he got out of federal prison, it was rumored in the press that he had made an agreement to never run for office again. And that was rumored, but not confirmed, right? There's no document anyone's produced where he said that. But supposedly when he got parole, he was let out. The agreement was he would never run for office again. But now he has actually run for office again. He ran for office in Louisiana, lost, by a mile, basically. So, now he's going to try to run for president. I'll be interested to see if the Republican Party lets him on the stage. When he ran for president in the 90s, they didn't let him on the stage because, look, Republicans are routinely, being accused of being racist. So if you have David Duke on the stage, that's pretty much proof that you're racist. So, let's see if the Republicans let him on the stage. I think there's a good chance they will let him on the stage. I'll be honest, because of the fact that the anti-immigrant bigotry and conspiracy theory kind of stuff. That's what he traffics in, right? He hates immigrants. He wants to build a giant wall on the border. He does think the problem isn't capitalism, that it's all just some secret conspiracy by the Jews or something like that. And those kind of ideas, even though, the actual, what David Duke believes, white nationalism, is pretty obscure, but, watered down kind of interpretations, elements of white nationalism are quite popular among a lot of Republicans these days. So they may let him on the stage at the debates just to have him there, right? The Democrats had Tulsi Gabbard on the stage so that you could believe, if you were anti-war, that maybe the Democratic Party had a place for you. It may be that the Republican Party lets David Duke on the stage to say to people that are white supremacists, there may be a place for you in our party. That said, a lot of what David Duke believes is contrary to the interests of U.S. imperialism. David Duke is very anti-Israel. Israel is an integral part of what U.S. imperialism does in the Middle East, right? The USA, their operations in the Middle East, attacking Iran, attacking Lebanon, threatening anti-imperialist states. Israel is so essential to what the USA does. David Duke hates Israel. So are they ever going to let him in the government? No. I don't see David Duke ever becoming a prominent figure in U.S. politics ever again. But at the same time, is there a chance they'll give him some play to kind of court those elements? And that's, again, we're heading into a period where there's going to be more Bonapartism. There's going to be more fighting within the ruling class. and factions of the ruling class are going to want to build up fanatical constituencies that will help their agenda. And, it may be that, one faction of the ruling class finds David Duke's fanatical beliefs to be useful to them in cultivating people to do their bidding. So it's possible. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more there is to say about it. Julius Malema and the Economic Freedom Fighters. Well, the Economic Freedom Fighters are a breakaway from the African National Congress. That's the ruling party of South Africa. That's the party created by Nelson Mandela. And the Economic Freedom Fighters, a lot of what they say is really great. And I agree with a lot of their rhetoric, but I also think there's really good things about the African National Congress. There are some elements in the African National Congress that are pretty neoliberal and reformist and believe in capitalism. There's a lot of serious communists that are in the African National Congress. So my hope is that the communists and anti-imperialists of South Africa can eventually be in the same party again. And that they can start moving out South Africa towards socialism. That's my hope. But right now, there are serious disagreements among the ranks of South African communists, and there are two parties. There's the ANC, some of the ANC are just completely reformist, though there are a lot of South African Communist Party members that are serious, that are members of the South African Communist Party. And then there are Economic Freedom Fighters. There's EFF, which is a breakaway. So, we shall see how these things develop. So there you go. But a lot of what the EFF said is good, but a lot of what the ANC says, there are a lot of elements in the ANC that are good, right? And you can't completely throw the ANC under the bus. You can't, right? And that's a mistake, right? That's a mistake that revolutionaries will often get into, just like Sinn Féin, right? Are a lot of the leaders of Sinn Féin kind of reformist? Sure. But Sinn Féin is the main, it's like the NAACP, right? If you support black people in the United States, you can't be like, oh, the NAACP sucks. You can't, you can be like, yeah, a lot of the leaders of the NAACP are liberals and Democrats and all of that. But in the NAACP, this mass organization that has millions of black people in it, there are a lot of serious fighters for the rights of black people. And there are some reformist elements. But, when you have an organization that's that massive and all-encompassing for a community, an oppressed nation, you can't just completely throw them under the bus. And with Sinn Féin, right, in Ireland, Northern Ireland, you have Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin, again, a lot of Sinn Féin are reformists. There's a lot of good people in Sinn Féin also. And if you attack Sinn Féin, or if you attack the African National Congress, or you attack the NAACP, that isolates you from all the good people in that group. Suddenly you're their enemy. And, the main enemy of the NAACP is racists, right? And the main enemy of Sinn Féin is British imperialism. And the main enemy of the ANC is the, pro-apartheid folks who are claiming white genocide and all that kind of bullshit. So, you can't completely throw the ANC under the bus. But that said, EFF is a breakaway from the ANC that's a little more radical, that emphasizes socialism more, the Economic Freedom Fighters. And I like a lot of what they say. And so I'm not taking sides. I'm for both. I'm for both the ANC and the Economic Freedom Fighters. And my hope is that they will eventually be in the same party. And my hope is that together they will move South Africa more on the road to socialism, because in a lot of ways, the South African Revolution has been a huge disappointment, right? South Africa's struggle for freedom was led by communists. And it appears that, it's not very far on the road to socialism. The Soviet Union fell around the time apartheid was overturned. And so it's a little bit of a disappointment. And so it's important that we see more progress. I'm disappointed, just like I'm disappointed with Sinn Féin in a lot of ways. So it's complicated. I'm trying to give you a nuanced perspective, but the tradition that I've observed when it comes to South Africa and such is that it would be a big mistake to just completely throw the ANC under the bus. You don't do that, right? You don't do that. And that, there's a history of ultra leftist elements attacking the ANC. Let's talk about this. That's not EFF. EFF is a real political party with real seats. I respect EFF. But there was something called the Pan-African Congress, right? And this was a group of, I guess they started out as Maoists and then they just kind of became Pan-Africanists, but they would go around murdering leaders of the ANC, right? And that's not good, right? The PAC, it was called, the Pan-African Congress, they would murder members of the ANC. in the name of, they were a counter gang that was probably supported by U.S. imperialism in the name of being more revolutionary, but in reality, they were fighting the ANC, which was the main opponent, and that the PAC, the Pan-African Congress. So there you go. All right, next question. Wokeism rationalizes why you can't overcome divisions and like race and gender among the masses. I mean, I don't know what to say about it. I mean, we've talked a lot. I mean, we've talked a lot about wokeness on here. Wokeness is psychological manipulation. It's appealing to people's trauma and pain in order to manipulate them to do the bidding of one wing of the ruling class. Wokeness is a way to never talk about class struggle. Wokeness is an attempt on the part of U.S. imperialism to give itself a makeover, to improve its image, to justify its wars around the world. Wokeness is an attempt to cement divisions among the working class and prevent any kind of class struggle, because the second you say you want Medicare for all, they accuse you of being a red brown. The second that you have a demand, an economic demand, but you don't exclude every anti-abortion person or every person who has any position on anything, it's this checklist of things you have to believe that is always getting longer, right? That basically, the way you make change is you bring people together. You bring all kinds of people together to demand it and take action for it. But the way wokeness works is that, oh no, there's good people and bad people. And every day, the list of what you have to believe in order to be a good person gets longer. First, it's, pretty reasonable. Don't be a racist. Don't be a sexist, right? Oh no, then it's, you have to be pro-choice. Okay, so everyone who's Roman Catholic, they may themselves be pro-choice, but they're anti-choice adjacent because they're a member of a church and they pay money to a church, so they ought to be kicked out, right? And everyone who's a Muslim, right? The Muslim community, right? Their religion, they don't believe in abortion, they don't believe in gay marriage, so Muslims are not welcome. You do this thing where it's this checklist of like, they see the world in terms of good people and bad people. They don't see the world in terms of class struggle. They don't see the world in terms of historical contradictions playing themselves out. Wokeness just means that there's good people and bad people. And the good people are people who follow the checklist, and the bad people are everyone else. And that's it. That's it. And that's all there is to it. And it's not a very complex ideology, but it plays on people's trauma. It gives people permission to unleash all their rage. And the idea is that if you don't agree with this checklist, you're a bad person. And the way to prove you're a good person is by attacking these other people. The more you attack somebody who doesn't fulfill this checklist, the more that you are a heroic person, right? That the best are those who tear down, are vandals, right? And this is not the ideology of class struggle, right? The understanding that William C. Foster and Gus Hall and Paul Robeson and Huey Newton had was that the greatest cure for racism in the history of the United States has always been the picket line. When workers see they have a common interest, when they learn that putting the needs of the oppressed people first is a way to advance the entire working class, that's when racism is broken down. San Francisco, the way the dock workers won the 1934 strike was by putting the needs of the black community first. For years, the dock workers had racist whites-only unions. When the dock workers would go on strike, the black community would work as scabs, and it didn't work. But then, when the Communist Party became the leaders of the dock workers union in 1934, they went to the black community and they said, we're going to demand a hiring hall, and we're going to demand that you get jobs on the docks, and we're going to demand the right of black people to work on the docks as part of our strike. And so in 1934, when the docks shut down, the black people didn't scab, and in fact, the black churches in the community supported the strike. And then the Communist Party, they won the strike, they opened a hiring hall, they created the International Longshore Warehouse Union, and then they made a point of hiring so many black workers to work on the docks. And as a result, many black people got jobs, good paying union jobs as dock workers. And so by putting the needs of the black community at the center of their struggle, all the dock workers advanced, right? That's the communist understanding, that when you get people to see that they have a common interest, and you get them to see that advancing the most oppressed helps everybody, that's how you win. Wokes don't think that. Wokes would have immediately condemned, because do you think there weren't dock workers who went out on strike in 1934 who were racist? There were. And the wokes would have gone to the dock workers in San Francisco and said, all right, is there anyone here who's racist? Get out. All right, is there anyone here who's sexist? Get out. Is there anyone here who goes to a church that doesn't believe in abortion, gay marriage? Get out. And then there would have been 3 people that went on strike, and that would have been it. They do it backwards, right? They don't understand the way you make progress on social issues is by uniting people around economic issues and getting people to see they have a common interest, breaking down the divisions created by social issues. That's how you advance the entire working class, and that's how you advance on social issues. That's how you get people to recognize that women have the right to an abortion. That's how you get people to recognize that gay people are not their enemies, right? Is when you have a worker who's a vehement homophobe and you have a worker who's gay, but together on the picket line, they're standing in solidarity against the boss. That bigot, who thinks that gay people are his enemy, is going to realize that that gay person is his brother, and that by fighting for the boss to recognize that he has the right to be gay, he's fighting to advance all the workers. That's how you break these things down. Wokes don't believe in that. Wokes think that, and if you just say, somehow in their minds, if you say what I just said, you're a Nazi. And on top of that, wokes have a specific mindset where it's not about trying, they don't want me to be right. And this is interesting. And this actually points to how I'm a little bit different when it comes to people like AOC. I'm a little bit different. I wanted AOC to be good. She's not. But I wanted her to be good. The wokes didn't. They wanted AOC to be awful so they could get points condemning her on social media. In wokes' minds, they don't want to actually see anything change. They want to get street cred and social media cred for condemning people. I wanted AOC to be good. She wasn't. I met her before she was elected. She seemed like a great person. She seems like she had good intentions. I went to a few of her town halls. Even after she did a lot of things I didn't like, I still tried to believe. But when it became clear with Force the Vote and the reaction to Jimmy Dore, and it became clear AOC was no good. But there was a lot of people on social media that immediately wanted to find a way they could hate AOC so they could get points on social media. That's not the right approach. There's a bunch of people watching this right now. They don't want me to be good. I'm a guy on here, and I mean, I'm no AOC, obviously, but I'm on here. I got 258 people watching me. I got, about what, like almost 30,000 followers on Twitter. Wouldn't it be good if I was good, right? Say you think I'm bad, right? Which a lot of people do. But, wouldn't it be better if I was good? So shouldn't you be on here trying to see if there's something good about me? That's not how the wokes think. In their mind, they're constantly looking for a way you can be bad so they can condemn you and get attention for that, right? It's the opposite of the correct attitude that you need to have. You're looking for people to be bad. You're looking to condemn people. So you want to find someone to be bad. You want AOC to be bad, right? You want progressive people to be bad. It's all about, how can I get credit for tearing somebody else down, right? How can I exclude somebody? How can I ban somebody? How can I cut ties with somebody? How can I condemn somebody? That's what wokeness is all about, right? I know the term didn't start, it had a different meaning in the black community, but I'm talking about what it means now. And the woke crowd now, the people who call themselves woke, right? The people that call themselves, I don't know what you want to call them, the fake leftism that goes around now. It's all about tearing down people. It's all about exposing people. It's all about preventing real coalitions from being made. And it's about emotions, and it's about resentment, and it's about good people versus bad people. And it's not Marxism, and it's dangerous. And, someone asked me about it and I answered the question. All right. Meghan Markle, potential POTUS of the United States in 2024. I mean, that would be a disaster. I'm against it. But could it happen? Sure. Right. And I mean, Haas hinted that it might be happening. And now we have seen, in addition to Haas hinting that it might be happening, we actually saw that that now there's other people talking about it might be happening, right? And you don't underestimate British influence in the United States. Don't underestimate the rule of British corporations, that Anglo-American establishment. Don't underestimate them. All right. Trotsky and Dimitrov on fascism versus this Echo. Well, look, it's not just this Echo dude. There's a lot of people during the Bush years, right? I mean, I thought Bush was a fascist. He wasn't. I was wrong, right? And there's a lot of people who I guess all over the internet there were a lot of checklists going around about what it meant to be a fascist. And all of them missed the essence of fascism because there's a lot of checklists for what it means to be a fascist, but they all miss the point. Fascism is not conservatism, right? A lot of these checklists, every conservative would be a fascist, right? There was a clear difference between Nazi Germany and fascist Italy and right-wing governments that have existed all over the world many times. Fascism is a specific form of government. It's when a liberal society collapses into an illiberal society and engages in mass destruction in the hopes of stabilizing capitalism. That's what fascism generally is. And there is a very clear, when Hitler came to power in Germany, you knew it. Something happened. Something happened. I mean, Reichstag fire, emergency powers. They make the stormtroopers an official wing of the government. They fascism is a pretty clear thing. There's not half fascism, right? There's not creeping fascism. Fascism is very blatant, right? There are fascist elements that are around, but there's blatant, when a country becomes fascist, when it fully collapses into illiberalism, it's very clear. And these checklists often, they're looking for a fascist ideology. And that's where they're wrong. There is no fascist ideology. Fascists believes all kinds of shit. The Ku Klux Klan in the United States was a fascist organization. And they were all about, they thought they were knights, and they thought the Confederacy was right in the Civil War, and they were, hating Catholics, and, they thought the Vatican was trying to take over the United States, and they had their beliefs. In Russia, you had the Black Hundreds Party. That was a fascist group in pre-revolutionary Russia. They never took power, but they existed. What they believed was anti-Semitism, and they honored the Tsar, and what they believed was very different, right? Mussolini's Italy, the fascists of Mussolini's Italy, they were futurists. They were all about science fiction and all kinds of stuff, right? The Nazis of Germany were all about Wagner. What fascists believe tends to be very, very different. It's gobbledygook. It doesn't matter. What fascists believe is not the problem. Fascism is not about what you believe. It's about what you do. It's about what you do. And when a society goes into fascism, it's when a society goes from being a liberal society to an illiberal one. It's when liberalism collapses into illiberalism to defend property rights of capitalists. It's when the danger of revolution becomes so extreme that basically liberal societies collapse into totalitarian states to prevent socialism. And it's generally in response to an economic crisis. And right, so someone asked me, there are different definitions used by communists. I pointed this out before. There are three general definitions that you hear communists use. The first one is the lame one, which is, it's not really getting the point, but fascism is authoritarian conservatives. And that's what Communist Party USA believes. They believe the Republicans are fascists. They've been saying that Republicans are fascists since the beginning of time. They've been saying that since the Roosevelt years. They've been saying that. Might have been some truth in it back then, but, they said that in the 50s. They said that in the 60s about Barry Goldwater. They said it in the 70s. They said it in the 80s. They said it in the 70s about Nixon. They said it in the 80s about Reagan. Republicans are fascists. We're moving closer to fascism. That's the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America kind of people, Communist Party USA, Social Democrats, and kind of lame, boring, ineffective communist groups, they tend to say that. And there's an element of truth in that. Fascism does tend to be conservative, and it does tend to be authoritarian, but there's a lot of authoritarian conservatives that ain't fascists, so they don't get the essence of it. That's like the mainline communist definition of fascism, the social democratic definition. Then you get Trotskyites. And Trotsky said that fascism Fascism is a movement of the middle class that is opposed to big capital, big corporations, and opposed to the working class. It's this kind of middle class radicalism. Interesting. It's middle class radicalism that is utilized by the bourgeoisie to fight the labor movement. And eventually it becomes utilized to set up an authoritarian state. There's an element of truth in that, right? The Nazis were against American banks and, British banks, but they were also against the communists. They were for the German industrial capitalists. They were for the Krupps and the Tysons, right? And often fascism has a very middle class character. They're opposed to communists and labor unions and oppressed groups, but they also have anti-corporate demagogy, right? They're against the big banks, they're against the stat, and that's normal, and that's an element of fascism, but it's not the complete truth. Then you have this weird concept of social fascism, which is the belief that like fascism is an attempt to imitate communism by capitalism. And that's true, right? It is Bonapartism, right? It's an attempt to apply controls to the market, right? The chaos of society, the economic collapse creates a situation where society is very unstable. Fascism is one faction of the bourgeoisie taking control of the state and utilizing the state to try and control the economy with heavy force. So that's true, right? So it's a capitalist attempt to imitate socialism without changing property relations. That's fair. However, and then you get some people, based on that, you get people saying stupid stuff like North Korea's fascist or the Soviet Union's fascist or China's fascist or if they sound like communists, but they ain't, they're fascists, right? If someone, in Venezuela, they're Bolivarian socialists. They're not Marxist Leninists. They must be fascists. No. And then you get people that take that and just start saying stupid shit like that. But no, all of these definitions, the ultra leftist definition, this is an attempt to stabilize capitalism, imitating socialism, the middle class movement that's against big capital and against the workers, the right wing authoritarianism. There's elements of truth in all three of those definitions. They're all wrong. And these checklists that you get from Echo or there was one going around, the 14 points of fascism, right? And it's like, controlled mass media and rampant sexism, and they all miss the point. Fascism is an attempt, it's when capitalism collapses into illiberalism. It's when the free market imperialist countries, the Western societies, right? The Western capitalist economies become so unstable and there's so much unrest and the economy gets so bad that in order to prevent a revolution, they adopt a heavily authoritarian state where one section of the ruling class seizes power and uses their power to take control of the government and crush all their opponents within the ruling class. And then, with their power, they try to stabilize capitalism with mass destruction, with depopulation, with the creation of prison camps and prison labor, with the creation of kind of an underclass of semi-slaves, with ultimately leading toward war. And Arpalm Dutt is the most brilliant writer on the concept of what fascism actually is. He wrote Fascism and Social Revolution, a very good book. And that's what fascism actually is, right? If you want to understand what fascism actually is, read Arpalm Dutt, Fascism and Social Revolution. So, yeah, and these checklists don't get it. These checklists could be applied to any conservative. I mean, and some of these checklists could be applied to any mass movement, right? It has a charismatic leader. Oh, shit, right? It wants people to be strong. Oh, shit. It's like the more you get into the bread tube definition of fascism, if you're anything but an internet woke, you must be a Nazi, is what they're saying. And it's so stupid, right? If you start applying these definitions, literally any kind of working class mass movement is going to be called fascist by these people. For the bread tubers, for Hannah Arendt, for Susan Sontag, fascism is when they don't like something, when it scares them. We don't want to be part of a group. We don't like charismatic leaders. We don't like military uniforms. They must be Nazi. It's pathetic. It's middle class, spoiled children who are afraid of actually building a mass movement and getting anything done. You know, they want to preserve their individuality. They don't want their mom and dad to tell them to clean the room. And so it's like, military uniforms are fascist. You know, it's just whatever. You know, it's obnoxious. It's childish and it's dumb. From what is happening in the EU with the sanctions and the censorship, do you think EU is getting closer and closer to the return of fascism? Well, I'll just answer that right now, Savario. I'm glad you asked. But no, because there's a clear line. There's a clear line when you get to fascism, right? Fascism is not one day this happens, the next day this happens, the next day this happens, and then one day. No, like there's a clear line. When Mussolini took over Italy, boom, very clear, right? When Hitler took over Germany, boom, very clear, right? When for example, in where is it? In Chile, when Salvador Allende was toppled and they brought in Augusto Pinochet, boom, right? Fascism is the collapse of a liberal society, right? It's when a liberal society completely collapses into illiberalism. You know, a restriction on RT, silencing Russian media, that's bad. It's wrong. And it could be, you know, again, psyching people up to be okay with things. But the EU is not fully at fascism yet. If the EU was fully at fascism, we would all know it, right? You know, and that's the thing, right? You know, various repressions of dissent, various violations of democratic rights happen under capitalism all the time, and they're bad. Fascism is very clear. Fascism is very clear. If we were living in a fascist society, I wouldn't be allowed to be on here talking the way I'm talking. They're making it harder for me to do that. But if I was in a fascist society, I'd be in a prison camp right now. I'm not in a prison camp. Now, I mean, are there factions of the ruling class that would want that? Sure. And I mean, you know, but, you know, and could they even put me in a prison camp and have it not be fascism? Sure, that could be possible as well, right? You could have a society where they just have so much suppression of democratic rights. The USA wasn't fascist in the 50s. McCarthyism had a fascist edge to it, but we didn't fully collapse into an illiberal totalitarian society, right? So, you know, you have to be clear about that. There's all kinds of racism. There's all kinds of capitalist oppression that is bad and wrong and should be opposed. That's not technically fascism. Fascism is it is when the liberal Western society collapses completely into totalitarianism to preserve the profits of the capitalists with mass degrowth. You know, for this to be fascism, it wouldn't just be me in a prison camp. It would be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people being exterminated or being, you know, shut up and killed basically in order to stabilize capitalism. Throwing one guy in a prison camp doesn't make a difference, right? You know, that's the thing, right? One political prisoner here, one political prisoner there. You know, fascism is when you're using the mass extermination of populations in order to stabilize capitalism. So there you go. All right. All right. Is abortion tied in with Malthusian and the synthetic left? No. You can be, I'm for the right to choose, and I'm not a Malthusian. And I think there's a lot of people that feel like I do, that the government has no business telling women whether or not they can get an abortion because that is a moral judgment, and the government should not be regulating morality, right? So I think most people that are pro-choice are not Malthusian. What scares me is that I'm seeing communists or people who call themselves communists make Malthusian arguments. I have seen multiple places people tweet, the capitalists are against abortion because they want to have more workers. That's fucking bullshit. All right. And I mean, that is such bullshit. Okay. That's such bullshit. The capitalists are trying to get rid of workers, right? They're trying to reduce the role of labor in production as much as they possibly can. They don't want workers. They are actively trying to replace workers with machines. The biggest problem the capitalists have right now is that there's millions of workers who have no place in their assembly line who they consider to be expendable. The capitalists are actively trying to depopulate right now. They're trying to drive down the population. And all the wealthiest capitalist institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, all of them are talking about overpopulation, reducing consumption. Planned Parenthood gets more corporate money than anybody else. No. The capitalists are not, you know, trying to get rid of abortion because they want more workers. The capitalists, you know, they are actively trying to depopulate. And they think there are too many workers. And even in their own businesses, they're trying to get rid of workers. Their goal is to hire as few people as possible and churn out as many products as they possibly can. That's how they operate, right? That's the problem, right? And you know, they're they're trying to figure out how they can deal with the fact that nowadays with 3D printers and all kinds of computer technology and artificial intelligence, they don't need the same number of workers as they used to. That's the problem. So the capitalists, I'm sorry, but this idea that the capitalists are trying to have more consumers and more workers. I mean, maybe a small business owner might want that, but even that small business owner wants to hire as few people as he possibly can to make his own profits. I'm sorry, but that's not true, right? That's not true. And then there's a new book that's published. It's called Degrowth, A Future Beyond Capitalism. I looked at this and I'm just like, oh my God, this spits in the face of everything Marxism ever preached. Marxism is vehemently opposed to degrowth. And I'm very disturbed to see Malthusian arguments coming out of so-called socialists and communists, right? Abortion is about democratic rights. It's about democratic rights. It's about the fact that the government does not have the right to tell women what right and wrong is in relation to their own bodies, right? The reason we have laws against stealing, against theft, isn't because stealing is wrong. It's because it's a violation of your rights, right? If I can steal from you, then you can steal from me. So we have this thing called a social contract that says I can't steal from you and you can't steal from me. That's how these things work, right? The government has no right to regulate morality, right? The government has no right to tell me what's right and wrong. If I want to brush my teeth, or not, can the government pass a law that I have to brush my teeth? No, because it's my teeth and it's my business. If I want to walk around without brushing my teeth and have bad breath, that's my business, right? And that if the government starts regulating right and wrong, that enters dangerous territory. That's why drugs should be legal. The war on drugs was not right, right? I am against drug use and I'm against the government promoting drugs everywhere, but you have the right to fuck up your life with drugs. Now, the capitalists will make it a lot easier for you. They'll turn it into a way to make it be profitable. We know about CIA and MK Ultra, but at the end of the day, if you want to do drugs, if that's what you really want to do, the government has no right to step in and say, well, that's morally wrong. And no, they don't. And same with abortion, right? We can't prove that fetus is an entity that the government has an obligation to protect. You can believe that deep in your soul. You can believe that deep in your soul. You can believe that. But there's no way to objectively prove that the state has an obligation to protect that fetus. There's no way to prove that. And if you can't prove that, you can't infringe on the rights of somebody based on your moral judgment call. So that's the issue there with abortion. But trying to turn the abortion issue into, the capitalists want there to be more people. No, the capitalists want to depopulate. The most sinister thing the capitalists are doing right now is degrowth, Malthusianism, reducing the population. They're promoting suicide on Netflix at this point. The capitalists are all about depopulation. And it's the liberal capitalists that are the most into it, right? It's the sinister forces. The Rockefellers funded Planned Parenthood. This is all true. And I'm really disturbed to see communists making that argument. I'm really disturbed by it. And I've talked in other lives about I'm pro-choice, but if people think that socialism is about abortion, people think that socialism is about drug use, we're never going to grow. Abortion, when a woman has to, when a woman doesn't have to, but when a woman is deciding whether or not I want to get an abortion, that's a bad situation. It's a bad situation. It's never a good situation when a woman is trying to make the call, should I abort or not? Why do we leftists want to have that what we're about, right? It's one thing to defend the democratic right, but we need to also be saying that we want to build a society where people can have children and support them and be happy, and again, when people are using drugs, should they go to jail for it? No. But is that a good situation when people are using drugs? No. And we should have socialism not be associated with people using drugs. It's pretty basic, right? We need socialism to be about good things, not bad things. Does that mean that we should support attacks on people's democratic rights for doing things that are negative or associated with negative situations? No. No one should go to jail for being a sex worker. No one should go to jail for using drugs. No one should go to jail for getting an abortion. The government has no right to tell a woman that she shouldn't get an abortion. The government has no right to tell a woman she shouldn't be a sex worker. And the government has no right to tell anybody that they shouldn't use drugs. That said, socialism needs to not be about negative shit, right? The right wing, this is why the right wing wins. The right wing associates themselves with stuff that normal people like families, having kids, like having the country be more prosperous economically, like, like having people get along with each other and not fight. Leftism in the public mind is always associated with bad situations. Women deciding whether or not they want to get an abortion, people shooting up heroin and drugs, people becoming sex workers, people, fighting with one each other, people breaking things and smashing windows, the idea that everyone has too much stuff and we should all be poorer, degrowth, right? The idea that everything leftism is associated in the public's mind. When you think of leftism, the left is what we're associated with. All of it is negative shit. And the right wing, they associate themselves with positive shit. Community, family, God, love. And it's like, if you're a person who's been traumatized by those things, which I am, by the way, that's probably, it's kind of weird. But, when I was a kid, didn't get along with my family too well. So if people, the right wing, they were all about family, I was not getting along with my family too well. So I thought, okay, maybe, maybe the left is for me, right? When I was, and so there are people like me, and like others who have been on, if you're mad at the government, you're mad at society. I mean, you might be attracted to things that seem countercultural, just things that seem like they are in opposition to society. But, and we all go through a phase. I think when you're a young person, when you're young, when you've been a sheltered child and you want to go out and see the world and you want to do exciting stuff, right? You might find, abortions and sex workers and heroin and degrowth and rioting to be very exciting. However, most of society doesn't feel that way. Most parents are terrified of their children becoming drug addicts, or terrified of their children becoming sex workers, or terrified that their daughter might get pregnant out of wedlock and be in a situation where she has to decide whether or not she's going to get an abortion, right? Most people want a society where people can have as many children as they want and it's prosperous. Most people want a society where drug addiction is minimal and is not present. Most people want a society where no one is ever forced to be part of the sex trade and all of that, it's one thing for people who feel it's empowering. They want to be a webcam girl or whatever. That's their business, right? But most people, most of what goes on in terms of sex work is not that. All right. Let's be real, right? And most of what the sex trade is a pretty horrendous thing. But, there's exceptions. But the things people associate with leftism tend to be things that most people think are bad. And if you look at countries where socialism is successful, like Venezuela, like Cuba, like China, like the former Soviet Union, like Vietnam, socialism is associated with good things. And that's what we need to do. And that's all I'm saying. And people, again, people don't get it. I am pro-choice. I have made that very clear. I have a whole video where I cut the section. I'm very pro-choice, but leftism needs to be associated with good stuff, not with bad stuff, and being pro-choice, the circumstances in which a woman is deciding whether or not she's getting an abortion are not good circumstances. And it's just a matter of association. All right. How do sanctions actually work? Well, I mean, I don't know what you want to know. I mean, certain individuals are sanctioned, which means no American bank can do business with them, which means no American company can sell them products. I mean, what do you want to know? I mean, the U.S. Department of Treasury lists people that are sanctioned. I'm getting into specifics here. The U.S. Department of Treasury sanctions people. You're not allowed to trade with them at that point. You're not allowed. Banks don't give them bank accounts, right? If you're selling products to the United States, I mean, every sanction is different, right? And that's one thing about sanctions. It's very, very different. One thing people have talked about is the fact that sanctions aren't constitutional. They have not yet sanctioned U.S. citizens because there's a very good feeling that they wouldn't stand up. And this is very interesting, right? The U.S. Department of Treasury sanctions people. You don't get an appeal, right? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dobhob. You don't get an appeal if you get sanctioned, right? The U.S. Department of Treasury says, based on our findings, Joe Bob is involved in human rights violations in North Korea. So therefore, Joe Bob is sanctioned. Joe Bob doesn't get a trial. Joe Bob never gets a chance to get up and say, I am not involved in human rights violations in North Korea. Joe Bob, they said it, you're guilty. You're declared guilty. The U.S. Department of Treasury and the president are the judge and jury. The Congress doesn't even get to decide, right? In a lot of cases, it's just executive order. So they haven't done it to U.S. citizens yet because you couldn't do that. That would be a violation of rights without due processes. But many people have talked about the fact that due process rights, undocumented immigrants still get trials when they get arrested. Did you know that? If you're undocumented, you're not a U.S. citizen, and you get charged with murder, they don't just take you out back and shoot you. They give you a jury trial, even though you're not a U.S. citizen, right? So sanctions are unconstitutional when it really gets down to it. You can't declare someone guilty of a crime and punish them for said crime without giving them a chance to defend themselves, without giving them due process, a court trial. And the way sanctions are currently imposed, they do none of that. So they are not at all constitutional. The blockade of Cuba is a huge violation of the U.S. Constitution. You're punishing people without due process, in some cases without even a clear crime. Right? It's not for something they even did. It's like in response to Russia doing something, here's a list of Russian people that we're sanctioning. You can't do that. That's not how it works. Right? So sanctions are completely unconstitutional. You're asking me how they work? They're unconstitutional. That's how they work. They're bullshit, is what they are. And it's based on the fact, it's the USA using the fact that it's the center of the global economy to bully people, to get what they want. Right? Oh, you don't agree with us? Well, we're going to starve you. We're going to make it hard for you to buy airplane parts. We're going to make it hard for you to buy medicine. We're going to make it hard for you to import food. Right? Oh, you don't do what we want? We're going to use the fact. And what is it leading to? It's leading to a whole economy emerging around the world that they ain't part of. That's what it's leading to. In the 90s, they could just cancel countries. Nowadays, not so much. All right, next question. The economic history of Vietnamese socialism. All right. Well, Vietnam fought a very long war of national liberation. You had North Vietnam, and that had its liberation, and then you had South Vietnam that was occupied by the United States, and there was a puppet regime, and you had all of that. Then, starting, in 1975, Vietnam was reunified. You had the fall of Saigon. And so the Communist Party of Vietnam was in power in Vietnam. However, Vietnam then had, faced an attack from Kampuchea, from Pol Pot, and they had a war with Pol Pot. And then China intervened. And, for the first 5 years that Vietnam was under the leadership of the Communist Party, they were at war. There was some programs where, they did do some basic construction. They had some literacy programs that went on. They built some hospitals. They did some stuff, but they were at war. They were fighting for their lives. It was about 1980 that Vietnam finally didn't have a war going on. 1980, with the help of the Soviet Union, they began constructing. And in fact, I believe the first Asian in outer space was a Vietnamese person who went up in a Soviet spacecraft. The Soviet Union was helping Vietnam. Vietnam was getting aid from the Soviet Union, was rebuilding. But the Soviet Union started to fall, and the Soviet Union fell. And in the late 80s, Vietnam started realizing, okay, we're not going to be able to depend on Soviet aid, so we want to have foreign investment. And, they did look at some of what China had achieved. They developed what they call their socialist-oriented market economy. And actually, when I was in Vietnam, when I was at the World Festival of Youth and Students meeting with Vietnamese communists, I actually, I'll play it for you. I will play it for you. I actually listened to a great lecture by a leader of the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union. I'm not going to play the whole lecture. I'm going to play a clip from it. Because basically, the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union explained that Vietnam is not a fully socialist country. They aspire to be that, but they aren't that yet because they're still developing. And they gave a great presentation about what socialism means. So I'm going to see if I can find that presentation that I video recorded. I video recorded a clip from it. Ho Chi. Here we go. All right. Let me see if I can just download the clip real quick. And it's one of the videos I have from the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2013 of the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union of Vietnam. And it's downloading. And yeah, so as it's downloading, basically, starting in the 80s, starting in the late 80s, Vietnam adopted what they call the socialist-oriented market economy. And the socialist-oriented market economy, is the fact that major centers of economic power are controlled by the state, and there's no property rights in Vietnam. They can come in and shut down any small business anytime they want, but they've invested huge amounts in infrastructure. They provide free health care to all children, and they have built a society in Vietnam where profits are not in command, but they've not built up enough, government-run industries to really call it a fully socialist society. In China, they have a lot of state-run industries, et cetera. They don't have that in Vietnam, right? In Vietnam, they have state infrastructure, and they have a lot of capitalism on top of that, and a lot of capitalism controlling the state infrastructure. But they don't have, at the same time, they do not have a lot of state industries and such, right? North Korea is a fully socialist society. China is a fully socialist society. Vietnam, I would argue, that they are more or less socialist, but they maintain they haven't fully gotten to the stage of a fully developed socialist society, which I think is very interesting. Let me see if I can just get you this clip. Downloading very slowly. Perhaps I'm eating up the bandwidth as we stream, but maybe we will go on to the next question while I wait for that clip to download. How do we deal with people who have automatic filters against socialism and communism? Again, make it about the program. Make it about actual demands, not about the word socialism, not about the ideology. Nowhere in the world have communists ever come to power by convincing the majority of the population to agree with their ideology. Never, right? I think the Bolsheviks went around in 1917 teaching people about dialectical materialism, trying to get the deeply religious Russian peasantry and workers to adopt. No, they went around saying, hey, we're for peace, land, and bread. Are you for that? Well, we're for that. We're the party that wants to end the war. Do you want to end the war? We want to end the war. You put forward a program. And you build a united front around the program with the party at the center. That's what you do. So the way to speak with people that have a filter against communism or whatever is that you come out with what you're for, not what you're against, but what you're for. We have our 4-point economic program for the Center for Political Innovation. You go around and you say, we're for this. Are you for that? And you win them to being for that. You don't make the question about communism or anti-communism. If you do that, in a capitalist society, you're never going to have a huge majority of people that are going to become full-on ideological communists. It's about, do they agree with what the communists advocate or not? That's how you generally take power. And that's what you need to understand, right? It's about the program, right? That's why the Communist Manifesto ends with 10 planks. This is what we're for, right? It's about the program. Right? The communist parties, they take power on the basis of their program. And in order to build their program, you have to unite with a lot of people who might not agree with you on a lot of things, but they agree with the program. The exact opposite of how the wokes want to organize. They want everyone to agree about absolutely everything. And if you don't, you're a Nazi, and good people and bad people, blah, 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 blah. And it's obnoxious, and it's incorrect. It is the incorrect political line. So there you go. All right. I've got a version of the video downloading quickly, and hopefully we can have it uploaded very soon. Hang tight, folks. Hang tight. Is there another super chat? Next super chat question. George Lukacs and his contributions to Marxism. I am reading George Lukacs' book right now. Actually, can I reach it? It's like right next to me here, but I'm afraid if I reach it, I will. That's because I'm sitting, I can't reach it. But that's the book I'm studying at the moment. After I work out, if I have some free time, I tend to open a book, and I've been studying George Lukacs and his book, The Assault on Reason. Or no, it's the Destruction of Reason. And it's about Nietzsche, and it's a critique of Nietzsche, and it talks about irrationalism and how the bourgeoisie has promoted irrationalism as a philosophy with which to attack Marxism. I'm not sure I agree with him, honestly. I feel like he's attributing a lot to ideas. He's trying to argue that these ideas flow from a material base. But philosophical irrationalism, is the basis of fascism. And I don't, again, I tend to agree with R. Palm Dutt, where R. Palm Dutt says that, that the ideas of fascists don't really matter. It's what they do. And I mean, he's trying to argue that fascism flows from irrationalism. And I'm not sure he's right about that. I think irrationalism is worth critiquing. And the section on Nietzsche is very good. I mean, he's ripping Nietzsche to shreds. And I'm going to learn a lot from that. I've already learned a lot from it. So this is the first Lukacs books I've ever read. But at the same time, I think his overall thesis that somehow fascism is rooted in irrationalism. Fascism is about what you do. It's not about what you say. There's plenty of people that would agree with Nietzsche that aren't fascists, right? But the fascists did agree with Nietzsche, and they did draw heavily from his work. But I have reservations, I guess, about the thesis of the book. I do. I have reservations about the thesis of the book, because again, it's not material. Hey, Caleb, much respect to you. What is to be done about the European Union? It's a pretty evil imperialist organization. Shouldn't it break up? All right, we'll talk about that. European Union. All righty. But yeah, I'm reading the Lukács book now, and I'm enjoying it. I've been meaning to read it for years because, the Marxist critique of Nietzsche. Lukács was a little bit of a tragic figure because he was a Marxist philosopher, but he wasn't in with the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks attacked him, but then in the late 30s, he was kind of brought back in, and he was brought back into Marxism-Leninism during the Popular Front period. He spent World War II writing his book, the Destruction of Reason, kind of critiquing the ideas of Nazi philosophers, which is pretty cool. He published it after that, but then, he was not really trusted by the pro-Soviet communists. And then in 1956, he joined the Hungarian uprising, the CIA, anti-communist thing. And so Lukács, he's somebody who was never really fully with the global communist movement. But this is a problem that I think the global communist movement had, right? Lukács, he was a guy who more or less agreed with them, right? But the demand for total agreement, right? The Comintern parties, right? The Communist Party of the United States, the Communist parties, they demanded this total agreement from people. And that led to them making enemies unnecessarily, right? Jay Lovestone, for example. Jay Lovestone ended up, becoming a CIA operative. That didn't have to happen. Jay Lovestone was a leader of the Communist parties in the 20s. He disagreed with Stalin, and he disagreed with the Communist International about the need to break with the Social Democrats to fight the Social Democrats. Okay, but they didn't have to make enemies out of him. They could have just had him be wrong. And I've noticed that with American communist groups too. I was in a communist group and I tried to leave. I tried to leave and stay on good terms with them, but they wouldn't let me. I mean, they just wanted to turn it into a big fight. And I was just trying to quietly duck out. You can actually probably dig it up somewhere on the internet. I wrote this nice, carefully worded statement. I love the party, but I'm doing separate stuff now. And then they just had to turn it into a big fight. And now there's all this bad blood. And I see people from that group on the street and they won't look at me. And it didn't have to be this way. But that's the problem, is that there's this all or nothing mentality. And I strive not to be that way in my life. Like I said, I wanted AOC to be good. Because if we're going to get shit done, wouldn't it be great if there was a member of Congress who was on our side? That would be pretty damn good now, wouldn't it? I wanted AOC to be good. She wasn't, but that's the mature attitude, right? And, I wanted AOC to be better. She wasn't, but you should want allies. And this all or nothing shit, it's not going to work, because right now we live in a society where the capitalists have it all. And if we're going to get anything done, and that's one thing about the Center for Political Innovation, we're not a party. We do not practice democratic centralism. There's widespread disagreement. Look, Keaton Mansfield, a member of the CPI, he's really against abortion, right? And he was in D.C. handing out rosaries to anti-choice marchers and stuff. I vehemently disagree with him doing that, but he's allowed to do it because we don't have a position on abortion. And, as the CPI, the overwhelming majority of CPI members are pro-choice, but Keaton is in the minority that aren't. And he's allowed to do that, right? And he doesn't have to call me up and get permission. If he was speaking on behalf of the CPI, if he was going around saying, on behalf of the CPI, I'm anti-choice, that would be a problem, because most people in the CPI are pro-choice. But at the same time, he representing himself is anti-choice, and we're not demanding total agreement from people. The other thing is forgiveness, and that's a big thing, and this needs to be made clear, right? And I apologize because at the beginning of my stream, I was in a place where I was bemoaning some of the attacks on us. But if you're one of the people that has taken a dump all over the CPI, if you're one of these people that has lied about us and smeared us and made fun of us, we will forgive you. Did you know that? The door is open. The door is absolutely open. The door is open. If you one day hit rock bottom, emotional rock bottom, there are people in the CPI who have done that. There are people in the CPI that were part of the synthetic left. And they were sitting on the internet all day, hating people, condemning people. They were using drugs. They were hopeless. They were pessimistic. And one day they hit rock bottom. And it wasn't necessarily a drug rock bottom. It's not like they ran out of money and were starving on the street. Some of them, it's just an emotional rock bottom. You get to be a certain age and you're like, shit, I'm just being so pessimistic. I'm just being so hopeless. I need to find a way I can live. I need to find a way to not be this way. And for whatever reason, they got over it. And then suddenly they hated me before. They thought I was a nerd before. They thought I was evil. They thought I was a Nazbol. For whatever reason, they say, you know what? That Caleb guy, he's got some good points. That CPI, they've got a program that I might actually be able to forgive somebody for. I might actually be able to win somebody over for. And we'll forgive you. We'll forgive you. And I've met people, there are people like that who hated us, hated everything about us, but then one day something happened. They changed. Their life circumstances changed, especially if you're young. I would never have joined a group like CPI when I was 20. I wouldn't have, right? I would have thought, revolution and only, but my life circumstances changed, right? And I think that's a lot of it, right? A lot of the way the communist movement operates is it's a lot of it's like it's a postgraduate scam. It's for 20-year-olds. You join it when you're 20 and you do it for a couple years and then you burn out and then you quit. Well, if communism is actually going to win, it can't be a postgraduate scam. It needs to actually be a serious movement. And that means that we need to appeal to feelings that are among the broad masses of people, not among college-age 20-year-olds who are edgy and resentful of society. That's a big part of it. But another big part of it is that we have to have an optimistic message that doesn't burn people out. You can't just be negative your whole life. You can't, right? I mean, maybe Thought Slime can. He can, right? I mean, he's just a big whopping pile of negativity. But, for most people, you either get so negative that you kill yourself, or you finally pull yourself together. You can't just be negative and self-destructive for your whole life. You can't, right? I mean, the ruling class wants you to be that. That's what Netflix is all about. That's what Twitter and Facebook is all about. They want you to just be this big pile of self-hate and negativity and resentment and rage. But you can't do that. After a while, you get to the point where you're just like, okay, I got to do something with my life. I can't just be mad on the internet my whole life, right? And the government has made it so I can't get a decent education or I can't find a decent job. But I want to be something other than a negative piece of shit. I want to be, I've been screwed by this society. It's not fair the way our society operates. I have been completely screwed, but I want to make a contribution. I want to fight to make the world better. And a lot of people get to that point. And it's the city builder within you. It's your inner city builder will at just one point say, all right, we're sick of the negativity. You're right. Your family may have treated you bad. Yep. I've been handed an unfair deck of cards. Yep. I'm living in a rotten society that is falling off a cliff and falling apart. Yep. I've suffered this oppression in my life. Yep. These bad things have happened to me, but you know what? I want to do something good. And I want to connect with other people. And that's a really, really big part of it. Right? Being on the internet and raging with people on the internet is really, it's largely about isolating. Right? First, you join the wokes and you isolate everyone in your family who's not woke. And then the wokes turn on each other. You know, somebody sent me a great article from The Intercept about how a DSA campaign fell apart. It's hilarious, right? And it's like these wokes, they eat each other, right? It's like spiders in a jar. They just start eating each other, right? That the wokeism is just destruction. And so eventually they start turning on each other and attacking each other. And pretty soon there's nothing left, right? And eventually, if you're into wokeness and you're into this burn it down, tear it down, I hate the word, eventually you're going to burn out on that. Eventually you're just going to say, I can't be negative anymore. And when you do that, we're here. We're here for you. And we forgive you. If you're willing to apologize, if you're willing to say that what you said before was wrong, that we're not Nazis, we're not white supremacists, we're not murdering trans people, we're not the KKK, we're just a group of people who, believe in anti-racism and anti-fascism and want to use socialist methods to make the country better. If that's where you're at, and you were willing to take back what you said and admit that, you want to start being positive, you want to stop throwing slime at people, you're welcome. You're welcome. And we will take you back in a heartbeat. You don't have to double down on what you said about us, right? You shouldn't have to feel like just because you attacked us, you got to stick by that, or we're going to hold it against you for the rest of your life. We're not going to. Right? We will forgive you. And that's important. That is really, really important. It needs to be said, because I think that a lot of the people who hold on to their resentment, they're convinced that they've said it. They got to keep saying it. You don't have to. Right? You don't have to. All right. Anyway, here's the video from Vietnam. Here's the video. Here is the video. All right. This is the video from Vietnam, from an actual Vietnamese communist workshop. Forgive the low quality. I was not anywhere near as good with technology as I am now, and I'm still pretty bad at technology. But this is a video I filmed from the World Festival of Youth and Students from the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union of Vietnam.
The explosive used by U.S. military during Vietnam War was also equivalent to 725 atomic bombs, which was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
El equivalente de todas las bombas que los Estados Unidos botó en Vietnam es un equivalente a 725 bombas que botaron en Japón.
Besides that, U.S. military has sprayed on Vietnam 80 million toxic chemicals containing one of the most toxic chemicals human beings ever know, which is dioxin.
Además de esto, los Estados Unidos lanzaron miles de químicos, pero quizá el más peligroso es el dioxina.
But the barbarism of the strongest imperialists would not subjugate the will of Vietnamese people united under the leadership of the Communist Party and Ho Chi Minh.
Pero el barbarismo de los Estados Unidos no pudieron subyugar la voluntad del pueblo vietnamita, que estaban liderados por el presidente Ho Chi Minh.
The Vietnamese people, united under leadership of the party and with international solidarity, have carried out the resistance war throughout more than 2 decades.
El Partido Comunista, con el liderazgo del presidente, han podido enfrentar este grupo. ¿Aló?
Let's skip ahead a little bit.
Necesitábamos de todos los recursos para poder mejorar las condiciones de vida de las personas.
But unfortunately, that did not happen.
Pero desgraciadamente eso no sucedió.
The Vietnamese people had to undergo through another decade of hardship.
Desgraciadamente esto no sucedió y el pueblo vietnamita tuvo que sufrir otra década de penurias para poder seguir adelante.
The U.S. imperialism imposed economic embargo against Vietnam for another nearly 2 decades.
El imperialismo norteamericano impuso un embargo económico en Vietnam por 2 décadas más.
They also organized various types of the sabotage activities against Vietnam.
También organizaron una serie de actividades de sabotaje en contra de Vietnam.
Khmer Rouge took power and started genocide in Cambodia and started attacks against Vietnam.
El Khmer Rouge en Camboya empezó primero a crear un genocidio dentro de su propio país y luego empezó a atacar a Vietnam.
When Vietnam helped Cambodian people to liberate their country from Khmer Rouge, then the West and their allies also focused on isolating and damaging Vietnam, supporting Khmer Rouge.
Cuando Vietnam empezó a ayudar a las personas de Camboya para que pudieran liberarse del Khmer Rouge, entonces los Estados Unidos y sus aliados empezaron a atacar a Vietnam para que no ayude a Camboya.
This struggle lasted for more than 10 years.
Esta lucha duró más de 10 años.
At the same time, inside the country, since due to the model of development that we applied at that time in Vietnam, we had faced also another problem of economic development.
Es entonces debido al modelo económico que se aplicó en el país, tuvimos también que enfrentar otros problemas económicos.
Productivity was very low.
La productividad era muy baja.
Being a mainly agricultural country, but we faced chronic shortage of food. Every year we have to import at about 1 million tons of food in order to supply to our people on a minimum basis.
A pesar de que éramos un país y somos un país agrícola, teníamos una gran escasez y tuvimos que importar 1 millón de toneladas de alimentos para poder ayudar a la hambruna que había en el país.
And shortage was not only concerning food, it was concerning all kinds of essential goods for the people.
La escasez no solamente tenía que ver con los alimentos, sino con todas las necesidades básicas de las personas.
People's life was in a very bad shape. Poverty was 75% in the country.
La vida de las personas realmente estaba en muy mal estado. La pobreza en ese entonces tenía un porcentaje del 75%.
Since the middle of 1980s, the Communist Party of Vietnam has started process of, we call it Vietnamese, đổi mới, and in English, the renewal policy.
Desde a mediados de la década del 80, el Partido Comunista empezó una política que se llama la política de la renovación.
The process of renewal during the past 37 years has changed Vietnam a lot.
Esta política de renovación en los últimos 37 años ha hecho que Vietnam cambie mucho.
Which are the key elements of the renewal policy?
¿Cuáles son los principales elementos de esta política de renovación?
First of all, it is application of the market mechanism with socialist orientation.
Primero es la aplicación de la economía de mercado, pero con una orientación socialista.
Market with socialist orientation in Vietnam with the main following characteristics.
La economía de mercado con la orientación socialista tiene las siguientes características en Vietnam.
We use market as a tool, but market has to be regulated by a socialist state in order to utilize its power, but to minimize its negative impact in order to promote and achieve social economic development objectives.
Se utiliza la economía de mercado, pero la economía de mercado tiene que estar regulada por un Estado socialista. Y el objeto de esto es poder disminuir todos los efectos negativos del mercado y incrementar los efectos positivos.
The second is the market functioning should be combined with macro planning.
Segundo, el funcionamiento del mercado tiene que estar combinado con una macroplanificación.
Every year, the parliament, the government has approved set of the objective of development that include not only economic indicators, but more importantly, social development indicators.
Cada año el Parlamento.
All right. Well, anyway, I put the link in the chat. I'll put it one more time. And that's video I took from the workshop of the Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union of Vietnam at the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2013. So I'm just posting the link one more time in the chat so you can have access to it. But, you know, I mean, it's important. There's also a very, very good essay. And let me find it. I think it's in my email somewhere. Let me look. It's a very good document. It's very hard to find. Let me, Vietnam document. I think I can find the link. The link, again, Google searches make it very difficult to find important stuff, but it's a document I often refer people to about the importance of socialism in Vietnam. And it's a document from a leader of the Ho Chi Minh, of the Communist Party of Vietnam that he gave in Cuba. It was republished by Political Affairs, which is the CPUSA's more ideological journal. And it's very, very good. And I wish I could find it. I have the link. The link, you can't find it in Google searches because it's old, but I have the link in my email. I'm just digging through my email, but I really would like people to read it because it's a very good document. It has a definition of socialism. It's a very, very good document. So let me find it here. I'm just trying to find this document. Very important document from the communists of Vietnam about what they stand for. I'm thinking we ought to find a way to republish it if possible. Because, it's a document they presented in Cuba. I mean, obviously if it's copyrighted or something, if the translation's copyrighted, we can't do anything with it, but I don't think it is. And it's a very good document. So yeah, let's see. See if I can find it. I'm just trying to find it in my email searches here because it's a very good document about what socialism in Vietnam means that was presented by a leader of the Vietnamese Communist Party in Cuba. It's a very, very good document. And I've talked about it on streams here before, actually. When we were first streaming, this came up a lot. And unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to find it. But it's in my email somewhere. But it's a really important document. So if when you talk to Chris Smalls and ALU, what would you want to discuss with them? Oh, well, if I talk to Chris Smalls, I would want to ask him about, what it's like organizing his coworkers, what demands the union would want, what reforms the union would bring in if they were successful. I would want to talk about how do you bring workers together of different perspectives. I would want him to talk about how does he think that Amazon is similar to other workplaces, what makes working at Amazon different, and how do you think that gains for workers at Amazon can benefit workers at other places? That's what I would ask him about. If you're going to interview somebody like Chris Smalls, you're not going to ask him, questions that are going to make him look bad. You're not going to ask him questions that are designed to, settle some ideological score. I would want to interview him about the struggle of the workers at Amazon. That's what I would care about. So there you go. I wouldn't be on there trying to play games with him. I would treat him as respectfully as I possibly could, as a hero of our working class. I think Chris Smalls is awesome. And I would give him an opportunity to talk about the very, very important struggle that he's involved in. All right, we got 3 more super chats. Number 1, Peace Corps. This is the Peace Corps serve U.S. imperialism. Yes, I mean they engage in intelligence work. In addition to the nice stuff they do, they engage in intelligence work. That's very well documented. You know, I mean, Google Peace Corps and CIA. That's like a fact. So there you go. Dominic Lusardo, Liberalism, A Counter History. I know that book is on my bookshelf, but I haven't read it. So I can't give you an opinion about a book I have not read. All right. The European Union. You know who one of the biggest promoters of the European Union was? One of the first people to promote the European Union was Trotsky. That's right. Leon Trotsky went around promoting the United States of Europe. And Lenin disagreed with Trotsky on that question. He said, no, we don't want the United States of Europe. We don't want to unify all the imperialist countries because that would result in strengthening and stabilizing imperialism. We support the fact there are rivalries between the imperialists. That creates a potential for the people of the colonized world to have independence, creates potential for the workers of those individual countries to rise up. European Union has been bad for workers. European Union has hurt the working class. It's hurt the domestic economies of the respective countries. Communists have to oppose the European Union. The European Union is an anti-working class institution. It is. That's all there is to it. Trotsky went around promoting the United States of Europe. And the reason Trotsky did that is because his handler was a guy named Alexander Parvus. Alexander Parvus, a German intelligence officer, who was a member of the German parliament, was also a leader of the German intelligence agencies. Parvus was part of the German secret police and was a socialist, like a social democrat, but he was a secret police guy. He sold arms to the Turkish government. He was Trotsky's handler, and he thought of the theory of permanent revolution, and he encouraged Trotsky to go around agitating for the United States of Europe. Trotsky was an intelligence asset in a lot of ways, and that's not surprising. There were all these revolutionary groups in Europe during the time, before the Bolshevik Revolution and afterwards, and that the intelligence agencies of various countries, they utilized them to do shit. Right. And in a lot of the assassinations that happened, the political assassinations, it wasn't just some random assassination by some political group that just randomly decided to kill somebody. It was serving the deep state of one country against another country's deep state, or one faction of the ruling class against another. And that there was this huge network of socialist and communist and anarchist groups and sects and factions. There were also nationalists. There were nationalist groups that were fanatical. And a lot of those groups were being manipulated. And Trotsky was very much being manipulated by Alexander Parvus. And the German imperialists thought it was in their interests to go around promoting the United States of Europe. And so Trotsky went around promoting the United States of Europe. And Lenin said, you're wrong, buddy. You're wrong. And what's really weird is that eventually Alexander Parvus ended up, giving money to Lenin to go back to Russia to stir up, the revolution, because he thought it would lead to Russia pulling out of World War I. So German intelligence played a role in getting Lenin, to the Finland station and back to Russia during the revolutionary crisis. So these things happen, right? Different factions in the ruling class battle each other for power, etc. So there you go. I mean, I don't know what more there is to say about that. But anyway, that's all the super chats. And yeah, I'll try to find that document from Vietnam. I think it's a really important document. I wish I had been able to find it. Maybe I can one last search here, because it was a very, very important document. And it's, don't you love it when things get lost in your email? It's frustrating. It can be very, very frustrating. It's a very important document. And yeah, I'm not seeing it. Not seeing it. But there you go. There you go. Yeah, I'm looking for the document. It's a really important document. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing this document from Vietnam about what socialism is. So I will dig it up. I will do my best to dig it up and have it for you on the next stream. It's a very, very good document. All right, folks, I think we're done here for tonight. Thanks for being here. We're almost at the 3-hour mark, but we're not at 3 hours yet. We're almost there, but it's been fun. I'm going to try to stream as much as I can, right? I'm working from home, and, we're weathering the storm, standing up for truth in a time of lies. And we're just going to keep going. Like I said, we're just going to keep going, come hell and high water. If you're a CPI member and you want to come to our national gathering, look out for the email, the invitation that'll be coming soon. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Well, believe it or not, folks, while that video was playing, I found the document. Believe it or not. So I am posting it in the chat. Those of you who stuck around, a lot of people are leaving now because it's late and we're saying goodnight. But those of you who stuck around, you got the document. Socialism and the Path to Socialism in Vietnam Perspective. Just posted it in the chat. So there you go, folks. Those of you that are sticking around, you've got the document. I'm posting it a couple times. This is the document. Here it is, right? It's a very, very good document. And I guess I should make sure the link actually works. That would be good, right? And the link does work. Socialism and the Path to Socialism, Vietnam's Perspective by Nguyen Pho Trong. There it is. I posted the link. There you go. One more time, I'll post it in the chat. So there you go. It's been fun, folks. It's been fun. Talk to you soon.